Chapter 436. Ning Ke did not see Chen Pipi and Tang Xiaotang at the back of the mountain of the academy. He could not help but feel curious. When he left the back of the mountain and passed by the old library, he went upstairs to read some books. He saw third sister Yu Lian by the east window and bowed to her. Unexpectedly, she did not know where Tang Xiaotang was. Was Chen Pipi really in love with Tang Xiaotang? He smiled as he thought about it. Then his expression became a little solemn. Some things belong to everyone. It's meaningless to worry about them. Yu Lian put down the pen in her hand and looked up at him. She said, for example, your business will always be your business, and you can only handle it yourself. It was already the deepest part of late spring. The east window was sheltered from the blazing sun. The wind filtered through the green trees outside the window was not dry yet. But in the forest by the wetland, cicadas were already singing. Ning Ke understood the meaning of senior sister's words. Looking at her innocent cheeks and mature and quiet eyes, he suddenly felt that he seemed to have forgotten something very important, which was related to senior sister. The summer wind finally spread from the sea to the depths of the continent. The West Hill Divine Kingdom was located in the southwest of the Tang Empire. It was closer to the sea, so summer came earlier here. The abundant rain and warm air stimulated the plants on Peach Mountain to grow excitedly. Countless green plants grew on the beautiful white jade cliffs. The greenery covered the whole mountain, arching around the numerous Taoist temples on the broken cliffs, adding a touch of beauty to the solemnity of this place. There was a stone house in a remote corner of the third cliff. Compared to the luxuriant surroundings, the stone house looked extremely monotonous and even a little withered. There were few people around. The stone house was not completely enclosed. On the side facing the cliff plateau, there were dozens of air holes. Light shone in through those air holes. Although they were not like windows, they could at least bring some light. There was a desk under the air holes. Yi Hongyu sat by the desk and looked at the paper on the desk quietly. She looked very focused, as if all her attention was attracted by the paper and nothing else. It was a letter from the sword garret of South Jin Kingdom. There was a sword made with clumsy techniques and lines on the paper. She had been sitting in the stone house and reading the sword on the paper for a few days. Her food and drink were all sent by the servants of the judicial department. She did not know that the cliffs outside the stone house had already turned red and green. She did not know that the seasons had changed from spring to summer, and she did not care about the change of attitude of the people in the divine hall towards her. One night in summer, someone came to the stone house. The door of the stone house was slowly pushed open, revealing Chen Baqi's seemingly respectful face. Chen Baqi looked at the young girl in a blue Taoist robe beside the desk and greedily admired the graceful figure under the Taoist robe. After a moment, he lowered his head and said, "The commander awaits your reply." Chen Baqi was an official of the judicial department and was once the commander of the cavalrymen of the Divine Hall. The commander he mentioned was naturally not himself, but Luo Kadi, the Divine Guard commander with a special status in the Divine Hall. Hearing this, Yi Hongyu did not react. She still sat by the table and flipped through the book in front of her. The letter with the sword on it had been inserted into the book by her. Seeing her indifferent reaction, Chen Baqi was not surprised. He smiled mockingly and continued, "The commander knelt in front of the hierarch for a whole night yesterday." Yi Hongyu's slender fingers that were flipping through the book froze slightly. Her gaze on the book became more and more indifferent. "The Lord Commander is very sincere towards you. Even the sect master has sensed this. The Lord Commander has asked me to pass on a message to you. He hopes that you will be able to understand this point." Chen Baqi did not say anything more. In his opinion, since even the hierarch had expressed his tacit consent to this matter, she was just a Tao addict who had been crippled. She had no right to refuse. Yi Hongyu did not refuse, nor did she say that she needed some time to consider like last time. She did not turn around to look at Chen Baqi. She did not condense a sword with her angry and cold eyes. She just remained silent. She silently looked at the book on the table, and then continued to flip until she reached the place where the letter was. Looking at the crooked sword on the paper, she said indifferently, "Even with you, there is still not enough time." Chenbachi did not hear clearly what she said. Yi Hongyu took out the letter and tore it. She did not tear the letter into pieces. Instead, she used her nimble fingers to carefully tear the sword off the letter along the crooked and uneven ink lines. After a moment, a small, thin and crooked paper sword appeared between her slender fingers. "What do you think this is?" Yi Hongyu held the paper sword with 2 fingers and asked Chenbachi. Chenbachi frowned and looked at the piece of paper. He could not understand it. Yi Hongyu said, "You can't even understand this. No wonder you are always blind." After saying this, she stretched her right hand forward and stabbed the paper sword between her fingers towards Chenbachi's eyebrows. Chenbachi used to be the commander of the cavalrymen of Divine Hall and had the cultivation of the upper see-through state. Even when Yi Hongyu was at her peak, he was only slightly weaker than her. Now Yi Hongyu's cultivation state had already fallen to the lower see-through state and might even fall into the no-doubt state. She was no longer the Tao addict from before. Why would he be afraid? Looking at the paper sword stabbing towards his eyebrows, Chenbachi was shocked and slightly angry. A mocking smile immediately appeared on his face. In his eyes, the paper sword that was about the length of a finger was extremely ridiculous. He thought to himself, she would rather die than bow her head? Then she could only wait to be humiliated. However, the next moment, the mocking smile on his face suddenly froze. Because he clearly felt a vast and boundless aura gushing out from the thin paper sword and instantly enveloped his body. It was a mighty sword style. Chenbachi seemed to see endless yellow water rushing towards him. He seemed to see the surging river at the junction of the South Jin Kingdom and the Great River Kingdom leaving the ground and slapping towards his eyes. He was terrified and his Taoist heart suddenly became wet and cold. Only then did he understand that the paper sword was not ridiculous. It was him who was ridiculous. His pupils suddenly contracted and he wanted to save himself. However, the sword style on the thin paper had already descended between his eyebrows. Puff, puff. There were 2 very slight puffs. 2 extremely thin blood lines appeared on Chenbachi's eyes. 2 lines of blood were drawn across his black pupils and the whites of his eyes. After a moment, the 2 lines of blood rose up and down. Blood and the juice in his eyeballs flowed out. Pain and darkness occupied Chenbachi's consciousness. Ah! What? What sword is this? He covered his eyes and fell to the ground. He kept rolling in pain and let out a desperate howl like a dying beast. Yi Hongyu stood up and untied the slanted front of her green Taoist robe. She undid the belt of her underwear and put the paper sword between her fingers against her soft skin. Feeling the paper sword against her delicate skin, she became extremely calm. Looking at Chenbachi who was rolling under her feet, she said softly, "I know you like to see my body." "My clothes are unbuttoned now," she said. Chenbachi covered his face and howled in pain. Blood and gelatin-like liquid seeped through his fingers. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said calmly, "It's a pity that you can't see it anymore." Late that night in early summer, Chenbachi, the former commander of the cavalrymen of Divine Hall, was attacked and blinded. The once proud Tao addict, Yi Hongyu, who was later forgotten, ignored, humiliated and hurt, left Peach Mountain under the cover of the night. No one knew where she went after that. A few days later, the Divine Hall delegation that went to Cheng and city of the Tang Empire returned to West Hill. According to normal calculations, the West Hill delegation should have returned a few days earlier. However, for some reason, the delegation took a detour to the South Jin Kingdom and was delayed. The carriage slowly drove on the steep but not dangerous stone path of the West Hill Divine Palace. The deacons and officials in the delegation all noticed that the atmosphere in the Divine Hall was a little strange today. Wherever the luxurious black carriage with gold embroidery passed, the people in the Divine Hall would retreat and then respectfully kneel by the side of the road to salute. However, there was something else in their expressions other than awe. Qing Lixue, the priest of the Revelation Department, lifted the curtains and looked at the people kneeling under the green trees to welcome the great divine priest. He could not help but frown when he saw the uneasy expressions on their faces. Did something really happen? He muttered to himself and then turned to look at the great divine priest of Revelation who was resting in the carriage. He respectfully asked, "I'll go and have a look." The great divine priest of Revelation was silent. The carriage of the delegation traveled between the cliffs and the temple. There was still a cliff's distance from the divine hall of Revelation. Qing Lixue walked out of the carriage and looked at the cavalrymen of the divine hall who were gathering in front of him. His face became a little gloomy. Qing Lixue walked in front of the cavalrymen of the divine hall. The cavalrymen of the divine hall all saluted, but because they were already wearing armor, no one got off their horses. He looked at Shinbachi, whose eyes were wrapped in bandages, and noticed that the former cavalry commander's face was extremely gloomy. He could not help but frown and ask, "What happened?" Shinbachi gritted his teeth and said, "Yi Hongyu betrayed the judicial department and the divine hall. I was ordered by Commander Luo to gather the cavalrymen and prepare to hunt her down in the world." "Yi Hongyu betrayed the divine hall?" Qing Lixue frowned slightly. His snow-like hair became even colder. Ever since the great divine priest of Revelation predicted that something big would happen to the judicial department, he had been very worried. The delegation specially went to the Sword Garret of the South Jin Kingdom for this matter. However, he did not expect that it would still happen. He looked at Shinbachi and said in a low voice, "I remember that your position as the cavalry commander was taken away from you in the wilderness last year. When was it restored?" "Just the day before yesterday. Luo Kadi is the commander of the Divine Guards. When can he intervene in the affairs of the judicial department?" Qing Lixue looked at Shinbachi expressionlessly and said, "You are just a subordinate of the judicial department. How dare you be rude to the Grand Master Yi Hongyu? Isn't that disrespecting your superior?" In the Divine Hall, as an official of the judicial department, Shinbachi was not afraid of the priest of the Revelation Department. Moreover, he was blinded by Yi Hongyu's paper sword. He was only thinking about revenge and how to capture Yi Hongyu back to the West Hill to torture and humiliate her. How could he care about Qing Lixue's attitude? He said coldly, "This is also the order of the great divine priest of judgment." Qing Lixue was silent. If this was really the order of the great divine priest of judgment, then he could not oppose it. At this moment, the luxurious carriage slowly drove over. An old voice came from the carriage. "The judicial department does not represent the divine hall. I'm back. There's one more chapter today. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 437. The great divine priest of Revelation was in the carriage. The proud cavalrymen of Divine Hall could no longer sit on their horses. There was no such thing as not wearing armor in front of the great divine priest. They hurriedly dismounted and knelt in front of the carriage. Shinbachi's expression became extremely ugly. With the help of his attendants, he slowly knelt down. Yi Hongyu left the judicial department, but it doesn't mean that she betrayed the Divine Hall. Because leaving is not betrayal. There was a sigh in the carriage. Qing Lixue felt the great divine priest of Revelation's disappointment and sadness, so he also became angry and sad. His snow-like hair fluttered faster and faster. He looked at Shinbachi, who was kneeling in front of the carriage, expressionlessly and said coldly, "Go and accept your punishment." Shinbachi suddenly raised his head and looked at Qing Lixue. If his eyes were not wrapped in bandages, he would have been able to see the resentment in his eyes. Last year in the Palace of the Wilderness, it was Qing Lixue who made him suffer the painful punishment of thorns. Now he was blind. It was Yi Hongyu who had betrayed the Divine Hall. Why should he accept the punishment? The mountain breeze of early summer blew by the palace on the cliff and lifted the curtain of the carriage, revealing an old hand. The hand landed on the window lattice and was slowly knocking. It was the hand of the great divine priest of Revelation. The cavalrymen and deacons of Divine Hall lowered their heads and did not dare to look at the hand. Chenbachi could not see it, so he still looked over there with a resentful expression. The old hand slowly knocked on the window. A faint aura shrouded the scene. When the people beside the carriage heard the light knocking sound, a strange and terrifying feeling welled up in their hearts. Someone saw Chenbachi's face and almost fell to the ground in horror. Chenbachi didn't feel or see anything. So he still looked resentful and even tried to defend himself. However, he opened his mouth but could not speak. He reached out to touch his mouth and found that his fingers touched something slightly wet and sticky. Then he felt something sweet in his mouth. Only then did he realize what had happened. The resentful expression on his face suddenly turned into incomparable horror and despair. His tongue was gone. There was only blood and minced meat in his mouth. Seeing Chenbachi's mouth dripping with pus and blood, the crowd was terrified. Someone could not help but exclaim. Several cavalrymen of Divine Hall subconsciously wanted to step forward, but suddenly realized that this must be the punishment of the great divine priest in the carriage. They trembled and stopped. The voice of the great divine priest of Revelation rang in the carriage again. You shouldn't have spoken. Can't talk. But you have to pass the message on behalf of someone else. Then don't talk anymore. After dealing with the cavalrymen of Divine Hall, the luxurious carriage continued to move towards the 4 magnificent divine halls at the top of Peach Mountain without any delay. In the dark carriage, the great divine priest of Revelation quietly looked at the early summer scenery of Peach Mountain. After a long silence, he suddenly said, I don't want to and shouldn't care about the affairs of the judicial department. But now it seems that I have to care. So I have to. Qing Lixue was silent. Looking at the old and tired face of the great divine priest of Revelation, he suddenly had a strong dislike for the bigwig on the seat of heavenly black jade. The carriages of the diplomatic corps had already dispersed. Only the black gold carriage of the great divine priest of Revelation was left. It slowly drove to the highest point of the divine hall and came to the solemn black divine hall. The carriage seemed extremely small and lonely in front of the huge and magnificent divine hall. However, everyone who saw the carriage, no matter which deacon of the divine hall they were from, was shocked and awed. They were awed by the great divine priest of Revelation in the carriage. They were shocked that the great divine priest of Revelation actually appeared in front of the divine hall of judgment. For countless years, the 3 most honorable great divine priests in the Westhill Divine Palace would never enter other divine halls because of their respect for each other and their own pride. People knelt before the stone steps of the divine hall, beside the stone pillars, and by the road. They looked at the carriage anxiously, not knowing what had happened today. They saw the old great divine priest of Revelation slowly walk out of the carriage, up the stone steps, and into the black divine hall of judgment. Many people exclaimed in their hearts. The great divine priest of Revelation was very old and very thin. However, when he walked into the divine hall of judgment, he seemed very tall, as if he was about to touch the top of the divine hall of judgment. He walked on the flat stone ground, and all the people of the judicial department knelt down to greet him. No matter what the arrival of the great divine priest of Revelation meant to the judicial department, no one except the great divine priest of judgment was qualified to express their emotions. The great divine priest of Revelation walked into the divine hall of judgment and stood in front of the empty and monotonous hall. Looking at the bead curtain in the distance, he stopped and did not move forward. He came to talk to someone, so he wanted to walk into the divine hall of judgment. However, if he continued to walk into the divine hall, the bad-tempered guy behind the bead curtain would definitely think that he was looking for a fight. The great divine priest of Westhill was also a human being, and a human being must have emotions. The great divine priest of Revelation looked at the figure on the seat of heavenly black jade in the distance and said, I went to the South Jin Kingdom and brought back someone's ashes. The bead curtain in the depths of the divine hall moved without any wind, vaguely revealing the seat of heavenly black jade. The great divine priest of judgment held his chin in his hand and looked down without saying anything. The great divine priest of Revelation shook his head and said, You shouldn't do these things. The great divine priest of judgment still did not look up and said indifferently, "So what? Under Haotian and above the seat of heavenly God, do I still need to lower my head to Lu Bai?" After a long silence, the great divine priest of revelation said, "Before senior brother of light left, you did not need to lower your head. But after he left, you could only sit on the seat of heavenly black jade. Your head was originally lowered." The great divine priest of light's escape from the secluded pavilion caused a great shock in the West Hill Divine Palace. Few people knew that this old man, who was known as the strongest divine priest of light in hundreds of years, had pushed down the confinement built by the great divine priest of judgment with his natal divine power. But almost no one knew that the old man had pushed down the confinement and brought great harm to the great divine priest of judgment. After such a long time, the great divine priest of judgment still could not leave the seat of heavenly black jade. The great divine priest of revelation naturally knew. That was why he said that. The great divine priest of judgment sat on the seat of heavenly black jade that seemed to be condensed from the blood of thousands of people. He supported his chin with his hand and seemed to be thinking. But his violent and powerful head was indeed lowered. He slowly raised his head, and his deep eyes were full of indifference and violence. He looked outside the bead curtain and saw the great divine priest of revelation standing far away. He said, "I can raise my head at any time." In the empty and chilling black Taoist temple, a gust of wind suddenly rose. The people of the West Hill Divine Palace did not know what had happened in the Divine Hall of Judgment. They did not know what the great divine priest of revelation had said and done after entering the Divine Hall of Judgment, nor did they know what this historic meeting meant. They only heard the sound of the wind. The sound of the violent wind was even more terrifying than the hurricane on the East Sea of the Kingdom of Song. It was as if countless giants were roaring and fighting. A storm swept out from the Divine Hall, blowing the gravel on the stone steps and hitting the stone pillars. People knelt on the ground in fear, but they could not stabilize their bodies at all. After a long time, the sound of the wind stopped, and so did the wind. The great divine priest of revelation walked out of the Divine Hall of Judgment. His body was still stable, and his expression was still calm. But the wrinkles around his eyes seemed to have deepened. People watched in awe as the great divine priest of revelation walked down the stone steps. They found that he did not enter the carriage, but walked to the highest point of Peach Mountain, the holiest white Taoist temple. They were shocked and guessed. The great divine priest of revelation left the Divine Hall of Judgment. He did not return to his own divine hall. Instead, he walked to the place where Haotian Taoism was supreme in the world. The highest and holiest white Taoist temple belonged to the hierarch of the West Hill Divine Palace. People did not know why the great divine priest of revelation went to see the great divine priest of judgment first, and then the hierarch lord. Similarly, they could not see with their own eyes what happened in the sacred white temple. All they heard was countless thunders coming from the white temple and resounding throughout the entire Peach Mountain. There was a light curtain in the deepest part of the white divine hall. The light curtain was composed of the purest Haotian divine flame. It contained unimaginable power and pressure. The light curtain represented Haotian's rule over the world. A figure landed on this holy screen of divine radiance. The figure on the light curtain was extremely tall. It was as if his feet were on the earth, and his head was above the blue sky, forcibly separating heaven and earth. Every word the figure said was like a bolt of lightning. That was the supreme ruler of Haotian Taoism in the world, the hierarch lord of the West Hill Divine Palace. The great divine priest of revelation bowed slightly to the giant figure on the light curtain. A voice sounded from behind the light curtain. "Revelation, you think too much." This voice was very calm, but when it passed through the holy screen of light, it caused the light to tremble slightly. Then, it turned into the sound of thunder above the ninth heaven. The great divine priest of revelation looked at the giant figure and said calmly, "The Tao addict is the future of the divine hall. Those stupid people actually forced her away. I can't accept it. Hierarch Lord, you kept silent on this matter. In my opinion, it is also very stupid." The great divine priest of West Hill had a high and special status. However, it was still unimaginable for him to say that the Hierarch Lord was stupid. What was even more unimaginable was that the Hierarch Lord behind the light curtain was not angry after hearing this. Instead, he fell into a long period of thinking. The Tao addict can't return to the temple. I know. She is already useless. Maybe. The Divine Hall needs power. She can still be power. Revelation said expressionlessly, I can see further than you. After the great divine priest of light left, the great divine priest of revelation was naturally the one who could see further and more accurately in the whole Peach Mountain. This was something that even the gigantic figure in the boundless light had to admit. Maybe you are right. The thunder gradually stopped. Revelation left. There is one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 438. The commander of the West Hill Divine Palace Divine Guards, Luo Kadi, was a tall middle-aged man. When he put on his armor, he looked like a mobile metal fortress. However, when he knelt in front of that screen of light, in front of that enormous figure, he was as humble as a dwarf, as if he was a thin and weak servant. Because he was the most loyal servant of the Hierarch Lord of the West Hill Divine Palace. He was the guard dog of the Peach Mountain of the West Hill Divine Palace. The Divine Hall needs power, more than ever before. Since the red fish has left, you'll be responsible for taking her back. If she no longer has any power, then I'll allow you to kill her for the dignity of the Divine Hall. Afterwards, you'll have to find some other kind of power. The Hierarch Lord stood in the light and said calmly. Luo Kadi kowtowed like a collapsing mountain. The great divine priest of revelation returned to his throne. He gently stroked the throne made of sunflower vines with his old palms and looked at the hundreds of deacons and officials of the revelation department kneeling on the ground of the divine hall. The wrinkles on his face were as deep as the cracks on the cliffs of Peach Mountain. Qing Lishue waved his hand to dismiss the people who came to greet the great divine priest. Then he walked to the great divine priest and said in a low voice, "It has happened after all." The great divine priest of revelation said, "This is not the big event that I have predicted." Qing Lishue was shocked and speechless. If the Tao addict's betrayal of the Peach Mountain was not a big event, then what was the big event that the great divine priest predicted would happen to the judicial department? That really big event has not happened yet. The great divine priest of revelation said tiredly, "All the fates in the world are predetermined by Haotian." The wheel of fate in the Buddhism sect actually means the same thing. What should happen is destined to happen, but it will happen later. Perhaps it was because of tiredness, or because of the continuous meetings with the great divine priest of judgment and the Hierarch Lord, the wrinkles around the great divine priest of revelation's eyes became more and more frightening. Qing Lishue looked at the wrinkles around the old man's eyes and felt worried. But he did not dare to ask directly. He asked tentatively, "Where is Yi Hongyu now?" The great divine priest of revelation said with a smile, "This kind of thing does not need to be predicted. Since the Tao addict has left the West Hill, she must have gone to Chang'an." Qing Lishue's expression changed slightly. He didn't understand why the great divine priest was so sure. The Haotian divine light shines on the world. Where else can she live except in Chang'an? The great divine priest of revelation sighed and then said with a smile, "Fortunately, Chang'an is a good city. We can see and learn some interesting things." Qing Lishue listened to the great divine priest's evaluation of Chang'an city and suddenly thought of his experience at the side gate of the academy. He frowned slightly and said, "That is indeed an interesting city." He Mingqi actually sensed Ning Kei's divine skill earlier than me when Ning Kei fought with Lu Yiqing at the side gate of the academy. He Mingqi was the disciple of Li Qingshan, the nation master of Tang. At the side door of the academy, Ning Kei had slashed at Lu Yiqing with his blade and the divine light had shone brightly. The cultivators present could not understand it at all. Only Qing Lishue and He Mingqi had reacted. Qing Lishue crashed through the wall of the carriage. He Mingqi crushed the carriage wheel. Qing Lixue was the Grand Master of the Revelation Department of the West Hill Divine Palace. It was not surprising that he could judge Ning Kei's divine skill so quickly. How could he Mingqi do the same? Recalling the scene at that time, Qing Lixue frowned and said, I can confirm that he Mingqi's state should be higher than mine. He is definitely not as weak as the rumors say. For hundreds of years, the greatest wish of the West Hill Divine Palace has been to invite the South School of Haotian back. Other than the boring dignity and reputation, of course, it is also because the people in the South School are extraordinary. Since younger brother Qing Shan is the nation master of Tang, how can his successor be as weak as the rumors say? The great divine priest of Revelation said slowly, I don't know how the Tao addict's trip to Cheng and will affect the relationship between the Divine Hall and the South School. After all, it is a matter for the future. Qing Lixue thought about what had happened in the Divine Hall and the attitudes of the Hierarch Lord and the great divine priest of judgment. He said bitterly, I think it will be difficult for the Tao addict to return to Peach Mountain. The great divine priest of Revelation shook his head and said, she will come back eventually. Qing Lixue was puzzled and said, why are you so sure? The great divine priest of Revelation sighed and said, if she doesn't return to Peach Mountain, how can the destined event of the judicial department happen? Summer came to West Hill, and so did Chang'an. The early summer in Chang'an was not unbearably hot. However, the sun in the sky was so hot that people began to feel annoyed. The bluestone slabs in the afternoon began to heat up. The renovation of the Yanming Lake was still going on. In order to finish the project before the arrival of summer, the construction team greatly accelerated under the pressure of money and the Fish Dragon gang. From morning to night, the sound of knocking and grinding echoed in the house by the lake. Fortunately, the original residents had already moved away. Otherwise, they would be tortured by the noise as the weather got hotter. Who knew what kind of conflicts would occur? As time went by, the project entered the final stage. Ning Kei took the tactical array drawing carefully drawn by Seventh Sister and began to go deep into the construction. After all, the money was in place. Mr. Chi of the Fish Dragon gang was too famous. Therefore, although the construction workers thought that Ning Kei's design was unreasonable, they did not make too much resistance. The renovation of the house by the lake gradually took shape, and Seventh Sister's tactical array gradually took shape. Then it was hidden among the flowers and plants on the white walls. The project was not finished. Ning Kei and Sang Sang still lived in the old brush pen shop. Knowing that they were going to move, the merchants on Lin 47th Street were relieved, but they could not help but feel a little sad. They thought that if this bigwig left, the men in black from the Fish Dragon gang would definitely not volunteer to maintain the security here, and the government runners of the Chang and local government would definitely not come here several times a day. Ning Kei did not know what people were thinking. He was really busy these days. He had to study in the back of the mountain of the academy, keep an eye on the renovation of the lakeside, and often go to the palace. The purpose of entering the palace, of course, was to enter the small wooden building. He had to shoulder the safety of the whole Chang and city, and it was related to his plan. Therefore, he had to get familiar with the God-stunning array as soon as possible. Everyone praised his talent in talisman Taoism, and talisman Taoism was originally an interlinked skill. According to reason, he should be able to master the formation that his master Yen Sei left for him very soon. However, it was a pity that his talent seemed to be wasted too much on talisman Taoism and various other skills, and he didn't leave much for the formation. However, Ning Kei had never been a person who gave up when faced with difficulties. Since he had to understand and master the big tactical array, these frustrations would not affect him at all. He took out the usual means of making up for his shortcomings with diligence and splitting books with a knife. As long as he had time, he would go to the palace to learn. His Majesty greatly appreciated his attitude and allowed him to enter the palace at any time. When he walked out of the small building wearily, the emperor would not let him go, but would take him to the imperial study. After entering the palace for more than 10 times, he became familiar with the leader of the Yulin royal guards, the bodyguards, the eunuchs, and the palace maids, and even with the empress who ground ink in the imperial study every day. However, he was still not very familiar with the big tactical array of Chang and city. However, this did not mean that he did not gain some benefits from it. Other than some benefits that could not be told to others, the biggest benefit he gained was the countless ancient trees by the Yanming Lake and the things that were continuously sent to the courtyard. The purchase document and the land deed of the house by the Yanming Lake were written with Chao Xiaoshu's name. However, such a big movement could not be hidden from too many people. Li Yu was the first to know about this, so she gave Ning Ke a gift that was absolutely worthy of the identity of the princess of the Tang Empire. The numerous ancient trees that were transplanted by the Yanming Lake were all dug out from her own fiefdom. This was really a great deal, and it could not be bought even with money. His Majesty and the Empress also knew that he was building a new house. The Empress chose a lot of antiques from the palace treasury as a reward, while His Majesty rewarded Ning Ke with many calligraphy treasures. This was the only thing that Ning Ke was not satisfied with. Time gradually passed, and Chang and city changed from early summer to midsummer. The cicadas in the academy became louder, and the heat in the city gradually rose. The renovation project by the Yanming Lake was officially completed. More than 10 houses that used to be separated were opened up, and the old walls that were softened by the lake air were repainted. The narrow alley between the houses was transformed into a stone path in the garden. Flowers and plants were in full bloom, which was very quiet and beautiful. The merchants on the Lin 47th Street plucked up their courage. Boss Wu and Aunt Wu, who sold the fake antique shop, took the lead and invited Ning Ke and Sang Sang to a farewell feast. Their time on the Lin 47th Street was finally over. That night, Ning Ke and Sang Sang moved to the house by the Yanming Lake. All the furniture had been bought by the brothers of the Fish Dragon gang, so Sang Sang did not have a headache about how to fill such a large yard. Under the strong request of Mr. Qi, Ning Ke kept the old brush pen shop. Anyway, Chao Xiaoshu had waived his rent for many years. However, the old brush pen shop would not sell calligraphy anymore. Thinking about it, when the spring rain fell next year, there would be no young calligraphers in the shop called the old brush pen shop, and there would be no middle-aged people holding umbrellas outside the shop. Accompanied by cicadas and unknown insects, Ning Ke and Sang Sang strolled on the stone path by the Yanming Lake. The beautiful houses behind them were their new homes. Countless ancient trees by the lake made the stone path and the houses extremely quiet. The lake wind passed through them, and the temperature seemed to be a lot lower. Compared with the stuffy heat in the streets of Chang'an, it was a completely different world. Sang Sang thought of the picture of Ning Ke lying on the bamboo chair outside the back door in the summer 2 years ago, constantly soaking himself with well water and chatting with the neighbors. She could not help but feel that it was a lifetime ago. I never thought that we could live in such a big house. When they lived in a cave in Min Mountain, they lived in a tree house, and they lived in a small courtyard in the city of Wei. They had imagined for many times what kind of big house they would live in when they were rich. Now when they strolled in their own big house by the lake, they realized how shabby their imagination was. "It's good, isn't it?" Ning Ke asked. Sang Sang nodded and said, "It's better than very good." Fuck, there's one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 439. Standing by the lake, Ning Ke looked back and saw towering green trees, white walls and black eaves. It was a noble scene. Thinking that this was his home, he could not help but sigh like Sang Sang. He said with great satisfaction, "We will live in a bigger house in the future." Sang Sang was a little surprised. She looked up and said, "Bigger houses than here can only be the Princess Mansion and the Imperial Palace." Ning Ke reached out and took her into his arms. He rubbed her head and said, "We often go to the Princess Mansion and the Imperial Palace. If we really want to live there in the future, I will ask His Majesty." Sang Sang leaned against his chest and laughed happily. The light that leaked through the green leaves of the ancient trees suddenly became much lighter. Ning Ke looked up at the sky and saw a few large clouds floating in the sky above the treetops, blocking the blazing sun. He pushed Sang Sang away and said, "Let's go boating." The little handmaiden was not too uncomfortable with the completely different treatment. She said, "Oh," and walked to the newly built simple mooring on the lake shore. The wooden stack, which was about a few feet long, extended to the Yanming Lake. There were 2 boats moored in front of the stack. There were oars at the stern and a canopy on the boat. They were very new, which was bought by Ning Quebec. The wooden oars cut through the white clouds and the blue sky on the lake's surface. The lake waves gradually rose and swayed to the distance, disturbing the water plants in the clear water and startling the fish in the water plants. The boats left the pier and sailed to the center of the lake. There was a lotus field in the middle of Yanming Lake. Ning Ke was half lying on the bow with his unbuttoned shirt collar. He lay in the shadow of the canopy and smelled the faint lotus fragrance in the wind. He closed his eyes comfortably. Sang Sang stood at the stern and slowly rowed the oars. "You should also close your eyes and feel it," Ning Ke said. Sang Sang put down the oars in her hands and walked into the canopy. She leaned against him and closed her eyes. Her sparse eyelashes gently blinked and her yellowish hair trembled in the lake wind. "What do you feel?" "The wind on the lake is very cool. I'm asking about the aura of heaven and earth. It seems a little stronger than on the shore." Sang Sang opened her eyes and looked at the lotus field not far away. Her thin brows furrowed. Ning Ke took out the map from his arms and pointed at the Yanming Lake, which was about the size of a fingernail. He said, "This lake is the left branch of Chang'an City. The imperial court dredged this lake last year. Nominally, the Ministry of Works responded to the request of the Chang and local government, but in fact, it was the daily maintenance of the God-stunning array by the Imperial Center Administration." Sang Sang was puzzled and asked, "Then will the Imperial Court agree to buy the house by the lake? I'm in charge of the array in Chang'an City, not to mention this lake." Ning Ke continued, "The reason why I sold everything I had to buy the lakeside house was because of this lake. The big tactical array in Chang'an City has never been activated, but it has been operating slowly. Yanming Lake, as the left eye of Qi, naturally needs to gather some Qi of heaven and earth. Although the self-uniform power of heaven and earth is too strong, the concentration here cannot be too special, but it is good for cultivation." Sang Sang nodded, not really understanding. "The most important thing is, if I can really control the big tactical array in Chang'an City, I can connect the tactical array designed by Seventh Sister for us with the God-stunning array." Ning Ke said, "At that time, I don't need to activate the God-stunning array to startle the world. I also have enough ability to borrow the power of Chang'an City and plant a lotus on someone." Sang Sang thought for a moment and said, "It sounds very difficult." Ning Ke thought about the learning in the palace these days and said bitterly, "It's more difficult than very difficult." Sang Sang said, "Young master, I believe you can definitely do it." "I hope so, but there is not much time." Ning Ke looked at the lotus field not far away and thought that the green lotus leaves would all turn into withered yellow leaves in autumn, and that person would also return to Chang'an. He could not help but fall silent. "Let's go to the lotus field over there," he said. Sang Sang stood up from beside him, walked to the stern, and rowed again. "Let's row," Ning Ke's song sounded on the boat on the lake. Yanming Lake was a public forest land owned by the government and was not allowed to be sold. It was impossible for it to become Ning Ke's private property. However, he had bought all the houses by the lake. The imperial court would not take it too seriously because of his status. Yanming Mountain on the south bank was not famous and there were very few tourists. Therefore, Yanming Lake was in fact the private lake of his house. There was only one boat floating on the beautiful lake. Sealing up such a beautiful scenery and turning it into a private garden that could only be enjoyed by themselves would cut off the opportunity for the people of Chang'an to get close to it. Of course, it would seem a little unkind and even morally questionable. However, Ning Ke and his handmaiden were originally nouveau riches and had never been kind people, so they did not care much about moral issues. The lotus field in the middle of the lake was planted by people hired by Ning Quebec. After these days, the lotus leaves were already lush and the flowers were in full bloom after being nourished by the lake mud. Sang Sang moved the oars, and the boat slowly sailed into the lotus field. As far as the eye could see, besides the green lotus leaves and pink lotus flowers, nothing else could be seen. It was as if they had entered a quiet maze, a graceful world that was completely different from the scorching summer. The round green lotus leaves were like cattail leaf fans lying on the surface of the water. They stretched out in mid-air and touched the walls of the boat from time to time, making a rustling sound. The lotus flowers were in full bloom by the side of the boat. The pink, white, soft and smooth petals were so close to the two that they could even clearly smell a faint fragrance. Ning Ke leaned on the bow of the boat and looked at the lotus leaves that brushed past him. He held a cattail leaf fan in his hand and waved it gently. His eyes were slightly narrowed as he admired the beautiful scenery of the lotus field. At the same time, he meditated and cultivated. He used the qi cultivation method that he learned when he was in seclusion in the cliff cave to constantly breathe in and out the aura of heaven and earth between the lake and accumulate the Great Spirit in his body. The drop of liquid that was condensed by the Great Spirit in his body was now rounder and fuller. It looked like a drop of water rolling on the lotus leaves and could fall into the lake at any time. The boat went deep into the lotus field. The house by the lake and even the Yanming mountain on the south bank were all covered by the lotus leaves. Sang Sang put down the oars and sat beside Ning Quebec. She reached out to the side of the boat and picked a lotus head among the leaves. Her little hand slightly tore the fresh lotus that had not been formed for a long time and picked out the pale green lotus seed. She carefully peeled the lotus seed and picked out the thin lotus core inside and then sent it to Ning Ke's lips. Ning Ke did not open his eyes and ate the lotus seed with her fingertips. When his mouth was full of fragrance, he suddenly opened his eyes and said, "The first lotus core is not bitter. Why bother to pick it out?" Sang Sang had already processed several lotus seeds and fed them all into his mouth. She did not listen to him and still carefully picked out the lotus core. "I heard that the lotus core can be used as medicine. We can't waste it," she said with her head down. Ning Ke was speechless and said, "Anyway, we are a family with a big house now. Why do we have to be so thrifty? If you have the time, you might as well let me write a few more calligraphy pieces." Sang Sang thought for a while and thought it was true. She looked at the lotus core on her knees and made up her mind. She threw the lotus core into the lake and washed her hands in the lake water. Then she walked back to the stern. "Where are you going?" Ning Ke looked at the boat swaying and asked in confusion. Sang Sang said, "When we go back, I will let you write a few more calligraphy pieces. I spent all my money to buy this house. Even if the palace gave me a lot of things, I still owe Mr. Qi a few thousand taels of silver last night." Ning Ke said helplessly, "There is no hurry, right?" Sang Sang laughed and said, "I'm just kidding. Tell me, where are we going at this time?" Ning Ke said, "Just paddle." The boat swam freely in the lotus field. Ning Ke opened the package beside him and took out the small iron can. He carefully touched the deep straight lines on it and found that he really did not have the ability of Sixth Brother. He casually threw the small iron can into the lake. These days, Sixth Brother made a total of more than 30 small iron cans, and now he was still making them in the back of the mountain of the academy. As long as there was time, there would be a continuous supply. The small iron pot was filled with enough weight of scrap iron, which increased the power of the test. Moreover, when thrown into the lake, it could be guaranteed that it would not float. The relatively troublesome thing was the fire fu in the small iron pot. Although Ning Ke's psyche power was much stronger than that of ordinary cultivators, it still made him feel a little tired to make more than 30 fu papers with the most powerful talisman power. Sang Sang rowed. He leaned against the bow of the boat and threw the small iron pot into the lake from time to time, ignoring the fish on the lotus leaves. The boat swam freely and he threw it casually. This scene seemed to be comfortable and natural, but in fact, he firmly remembered the position of the small iron pot in the lake. The boat moved among the lotuses and the green leaves. The lake water suddenly broke, making a clear and pleasant sound. It was like frogs jumping from the boat into the lake from time to time. When the boat sailed out of the lotus field, the small iron pot had completely sunk into the lake. At this time, the sky was covered by rain and clouds, and no one knew when it was dusk. Ning Ke stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the shore that was getting closer and closer. There was a steep but not high Yanming mountain on the shore. He squinted his eyes and felt the lake breeze, which was much cooler than yesterday, caressing his cheeks. It was very comfortable. The boat reached the south bank, and the two went ashore into the forest. They picked up the grass along the way and finally reached the peak of Yanming Mountain. The peak was not high, but they could overlook the lake. Ning Ke looked at the courtyard on the north bank of the lake and looked at the looming lines between the trees and eaves. He silently compared it with the tactical array left by Seventh Sister in his heart and confirmed that there was no difference. If Haotian can give me enough time to connect this lake with the God-stunning array, then I believe that I can kill anyone I want here. Just after he said this, it seemed that Haotian could no longer tolerate his arrogance. A light suddenly flashed in the depths of the dense rain clouds in the sky, and then there was a rumbling thunder. The rain fell without warning and instantly turned into countless water curtains, covering the entire Cheng and city. Yanming Lake and Yanming Mountain were silent in the rain. At the moment when the lightning flashed and thunder roared, Sang Sang opened the big black umbrella as fast as she could. Ning Ke looked up at the black umbrella and said, "It is easy to be struck to death with an umbrella in a thunderstorm." Sang Sang said, "You said that when we were young, but we were not struck to death." Ning Ke sighed and said, "It is indeed a very magical world." Then close your eyes and feel it. The rain was pouring. Thunder and lightning intertwined. Sang Sang stood on the edge of the cliff, facing the turbulent lake water. She closed her eyes and held the handle of the big black umbrella tightly. After some time, Ning Ke asked with a serious expression, "How do you feel?" Sang Sang opened her eyes, which were brighter than the lightning in the rain clouds. "I can feel everything. That's all for today. See you tomorrow. I am really not used to writing during the day. My eyes are always blurred, but it seems to be efficient. I hope it can continue." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 440. Sang Sang was a little handmaiden. Sang Sang was not an ordinary handmaiden. She had an amazing memory. She could easily remember all the numbers she had seen since she started to count. This could be testified by the soldiers and civilians in the city of Wei. She was very smart. This could be testified by Chen Pippi, who had walked out of the old brush pen shop several times. Chen Pippi was a genius recognized by both Haotian Taoism and Cheng and Academy. The reason why Sang Sang often seemed a little clumsy or even dull was not that her brain was not good. In Ning Ke's words, she was just a little lazy and did not want to think about many things. Ning Ke knew more about Sang Sang's special features than anyone else in the world, such as her intelligence and her unique ability. However, in the past 10 years, he had not thought about or touched these special features of Sang Sang. This was his instinctive choice. Because he could not understand why he had picked up a little baby girl from a pile of corpses by the roadside of the wasteland in Hebei County. The baby girl seemed to be hiding some secrets, which made him feel a little scared. It was not until the great divine priest of light escaped from the West Hill and came to Cheng and city and took Sang Sang as his disciple. Sang Sang became the next great divine priest of light in the West Hill Divine Palace. Ning Ke then realized that this was the mark of fate on Sang Sang. This was the lucky chance of the little baby girl. Fate and secrets had already appeared in front of him, so there was no more fear. He could only admit and accept it. In the past 6 months, Ning Ke no longer avoided it. Instead, he began to train or explore Sangsang's potential in cultivation. Today, there was a thunderstorm by the Yanming Lake. Sangsang stood on the edge of the cliff, holding the big black umbrella. She said that she felt everything. 2 years ago, on the journey from the city of Wei to Chang and City, Liu Qingshan once told Ning Ke that when a cultivator first comprehended the range of the qi of heaven and earth that he could feel represented the aptitude of that cultivator. It could even predict which step he would take in the future. Some cultivators could feel a pond, and some could feel a lake. When the Sage of Sword, Lu Bai, was enlightened, he felt a big river. What Ning Ke felt was a warm ocean. However, he had never told anyone about this because even he did not believe that his cultivation potential was stronger than the Sage of Sword, Lu Bai's. In fact, the various stories that happened during his cultivation journey proved that he was wrong. Sangsang said that she had sensed everything, but it did not mean that she was more powerful than Lu Bai. It meant something else, something that only she and Ning Ke could understand. You're trying it now? Sangsang handed him the big black umbrella. Ning Ke took the big black umbrella. His palms and the umbrella handle were full of rainwater. The psyche power was slowly released from his sense of perception and passed through his palm into the handle of the big black umbrella. Then, it quietly covered the oil-stained surface of the big black umbrella. It passed through the majestic rainstorm and diffused towards Yanming Lake at the bottom of the cliff. Ning Ke also felt a lot. He sensed the lake that was jumping restlessly like boiling water after being hit by the storm. He sensed the lotus leaves in the lotus field that were rattling restlessly like drums. He sensed the frightened frogs under the lotus leaves. He sensed the small iron pots that looked like stones in the depths of the lake. Ning Ke looked up at the sky and tilted the black umbrella backward. The heavy rain immediately soaked his body. The dark clouds in the sky rolled and squeezed. After the dark clouds, there were more dark clouds. Countless raindrops poured down from the layers of dark clouds, looking like countless old black snakes biting each other crazily. Suddenly, an extremely thick and straight bolt of lightning crossed the entire sky from the northwest of Chang and City without warning. It instantly tore apart the rolling rain clouds. The thunder came soon after and exploded above Yanming Lake. Boom! It was unknown whether it was the power of the thunder or something else, but the water of Yanming Lake suddenly fluctuated. Water splashed everywhere and the lotus branches shook violently, as if they would break at any time. Ning Ke looked down at the surface of the lake that was surging like a fountain. He looked at the waves and broken branches that were gradually dispersing towards the shore. He suddenly said, "Yes." Sangsang wiped the rain off her face and did not speak. After that terrifying bolt of lightning, the sky seemed to have officially begun to get angry. Bolts of lightning came one after another, illuminating Chang and City, which was originally covered in darkness by the dark clouds. The dull thunder did not show any signs of stopping. The continuous explosions did not give the people in the city any chance to breathe. In the violent thunder, Ning Ke held the black umbrella and looked at the north shore of Yanming Lake. He said something, but because the thunder was too loud and the rain was too violent, only he could hear it. He pointed to the courtyard on the north shore and said, "Start from the courtyard." He pointed to the shaking lake and said, "Continue in the lake." Then he looked at Sangsang and the Yanming Peak under his feet and said, "End here." Sangsang took the big black umbrella from him and said, "Don't let him go up the mountain." Ning Ke said after a moment of silence, "I'll try my best. If I still can't kill him in the lake and don't let him go up the mountain, then I'll go down the mountain." Sangsang said, "What about me if you go down the mountain?" Ning Ke said, "You watch me from the mountain." Sangsang said, "I can help you." "You can definitely help me, but that's before I go down the mountain. And I believe that there will be many people watching that day, such as second brother, so you'll be safe." After saying this, Ning Ke walked down the mountain. The heavy rain in midsummer came abruptly and left quickly without any reluctance. When Ning Ke and Sang Sang walked to the lake at the foot of the mountain, the rain stopped. After the rain stopped, they returned to the boat. Ning Ke picked up the boat with one hand and poured out the accumulated rainwater in the cabin. The boat wandered on the Yanming Lake that had calmed down again. After the heavy rain, the air on the lake became extremely clean and fresh. The heat of midsummer was swept away, and the lake wind was filled with the sweet smell of broken green branches. The boat sailed into a corner of the lotus field. Here, the lotus branches were broken, the lotus flowers were broken, and the lake water was turbid. It looked very miserable. No matter how powerful the thunder and lightning in the sky was, it could not cause such a scene. Some traces of iron slag could be vaguely seen on the broken lotus leaves floating on the lake. Ning Ke looked at the broken lotus branches in the lake and said with a smile, "Keep the broken lotus, and listen to the thunder." Tiang City was located in the northeast border of the Tang Empire. It was near Min Mountain and the wilderness. Even in midsummer, it was extremely cool. After the summer, the rain gradually increased, but thunder was rarely heard. There was more rain, but it didn't mean that people could dig lakes and plant lotuses like in the south. Only the general's mansion had a lotus pond in Tiang City. Only a few people could see the wilted lotus. Naturally, not many people in this border town would lament about the wilted lotus like the poets and scholars. However, when the people in Tiang City saw the broken Tang Empire cavalry in the meadow outside the city, they could not help but be shocked, and even shocked to the point of speechlessness. For many years, the Tang Empire's army had not suffered any losses. The northeast border military led by General Xiahou had never lost a battle. Why was the cavalry outside the city a broken army? In fact, this was just a misunderstanding that was not good. The Tang Empire cavalry on the meadow outside Tiang City did not lose the battle in the wilderness. It was just that after a long journey, their armor was stained with dust, their horses were tired, and the people were tired. Most importantly, all of their faces were filled with numbness. The team was filled with an atmosphere of decline, so they were mistaken for a broken army. The reason why the Tang Empire soldiers were numb was the desolate man in the forest not far away. The man's leather robe had long been tattered. Blood mixed with dust was smeared on the clothes that he had stolen from somewhere. He looked extremely tired and could even collapse at any time. It was such a seriously injured man who followed the Tang Empire cavalry from the depths of the wilderness to the outside of Tiang City and did not collapse. The Tang Empire cavalry looked at the man in the distance with numb expressions and even some reverence in their eyes. In the past few days, the man had been following the Tang Empire cavalry, ready to rush into the camp and assassinate General Xiahou. He had tried 17 times and failed 17 times, but he still persisted. It was not that the Tang Empire cavalry did not want to kill the man, but the man proved with his strength and perseverance that he was difficult to kill, especially when the Tang Empire soldiers did not want to pay the price of mutual destruction. Ambushes and counter-ambushes, ambushes and encirclement, happened continuously in this long journey and then ended in silence. The man could not kill General Xiahou. Xiahou and his invincible cavalry could not kill the man either. It had happened too many times. All the Tang Empire cavalry, even the proudest generals, were a little numb when faced with the powerful man who was like a beggar. The sound of hooves rang out and the vigilant cavalry parted to form a path. Xiahou galloped over and looked at Tang on the meadow in the distance without any emotion on his face. In the past few days, the Tang Empire cavalry had tried everything to lure and kill the powerhouse from the Devil's Doctrine. They had almost succeeded several times, but in the end, the other party had escaped. Tang also had a few opportunities to successfully get close to Xiahou and forced Xiahou to start a fierce battle with him. Xiahou was not fighting alone. He had countless cavalrymen as guards. So, in this continuous battle, Tang was ultimately at an absolute disadvantage. Now Tang was seriously injured and did not have the demeanor of a powerhouse from the Devil's Doctrine. He was more like a poor beggar. However, Tang was not dead, and Tang still insisted on killing him. Xiahou was also seriously injured. The armor made by the academy on his body was finally destroyed by Tang's demonic blood-red broadsword the day before yesterday. Behind me is Tiang's city. Xiahou looked at Tang on the meadow in the distance and said indifferently, "You have no chance." Tang said, "I have said that you are old." Xiahou said, "I have also said that old and frail means nothing to you and me." Tang said, "The problem is that your heart is old. From the moment you decided to retire, you are really old. Old is weak. If Tiang's city was 100 miles away, you would definitely die in my hands." Xiahou was silent and found that what Tang said was right. "But I have Sun's Oil City, and I have countless cavalrymen who are loyal to me." Xiahou said, "And you are only one person." Tang said, "If you could understand that fighting is ultimately a personal matter, maybe you would not have made so many mistakes and would not be as old as you are now." In midsummer, the grass was long and the eagles were flying. There were countless wounds on Tang's body. Blood was still dripping, falling on the grass and starting to burn. Xiahou covered his mouth with his fist and began to cough. There was blood flowing from his fingers, like an injured eagle on the rock wall. Eagles were generally called eagles. However, eagles could grow old, but humans could not. And to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 441. 1,000 years ago, the desolate man was the master of the northern prairie of the mainland. So even today, the prairie was still called the wilderness. There were eagles on the prairie, so the desolate man was good at breeding eagles. Even though they were defeated by the Tang Empire and were forced to move north to the cold region in the far north, the desolate man still did not give up breeding eagles. Xiahou was a desolate man, so was Tang, so they were familiar with breeding eagles. Looking at Tang, who was dressed in rags and dirty like a beggar, on the meadow by the mountain forest in the distance, Xiahou suddenly remembered his experience of training an eagle when he was a child. He remembered the scene of the young and tender eagle teetering on the iron frame but refusing to lower its head stubbornly. From the depths of the wilderness to the south, he had been fighting for thousands of miles. He had always been very confident, thinking that he was torturing Tang like an eagle. He used Tang's anger and hatred to make Tang unable to close his eyes and use all of his energy to fight day after day. Xiahou had thought that he was about to succeed. He saw with his own eyes that Tang's genuine qi was draining and his energy was getting tired. His rock-hard body became ordinary and could be injured. He thought that Tang's blood would be drained during the long journey and he would finally fall down like the young eagle. However, he did not expect that Tang did not fall down. Instead, he felt an unprecedented fatigue, weakness, and even a trace of tiredness in the deepest part of his body. Could it be that he was the eagle that was being tormented? Xiahou kept coughing and blood kept spilling from his fist that was stuck to his lips. But his expression was still indifferent and calm, and his deep-set eyes were as cold as ice. Being old was not scary. No matter on the prairie or on the cliff by the hot sea, only an old eagle was a real eagle. He put down his fist and took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood stains at the corner of his mouth. He looked at Tang in the distance expressionlessly and said, "Your perseverance surprised me, but it was just a surprise. After all, you are not your teacher. Before you cross that threshold, you will never be a threat to me." Tang looked down at the long grass at his feet that had been set on fire by his blood. The continuous battles had seriously injured him. The seemingly inconspicuous Tang cavalrymen, with their strong military discipline and tactical organization, had caused him a lot of trouble. As the genuine qi in his body was gradually exhausted, his seemingly indestructible body finally bled under those sabers and arrows. The devil's doctrine had withered. As a world wayfarer of the devil's doctrine, he was more like a loner. Not to mention compared to the countless Taoist priests of the Westhill Divine Palace, even compared to the traitor Xiahou, he seemed so weak. In a sense, the current devil's doctrine was him. He was the devil's sect. He was the last spirit and pride of the devil's sect, so he could not fall. Therefore, even though he was seriously injured and could not see any hope, he still silently fought with Xiaoho and the thousands of Tang cavalrymen until they reached Tiang City. Tang raised his head and looked at Xiaoho, who was surrounded and protected by countless cavalrymen. He said, "Look at your body that seems strong but is actually like rotten wood. Ask your heart that seems strong but is actually like mud. If I really can't threaten you, why would you turn around and say these words to me at this time?" Xiaoho was silent for a long time and then said, "You can't follow me back to Chang'an. The Central Plains is the human world shrouded by Haotian's divine light. Even heaven can't tolerate you. What can you do?" As the last and strongest survivor of the devil's doctrine, Tang could live freely in the wilderness and face Yisu. But he was very clear that if he really went to the Central Plains, he would inevitably face the endless pursuit of the powerhouses of the West Hill Divine Palace. In the end, he would die. "I really can't enter the Central Plains." Tang looked at Tiang City not far away and said, "I don't even dare to enter that city. But I have already hurt you. I have made you weak and nervous, so I know you are destined to die." Xiaoho said, "Why do you say these meaningless words? I won't do meaningless things, and I won't say meaningless things. I am definitely not the only one in the world who wants to kill you. When you leave the military camp and return to Chang'an, or when you retire, the ghosts in the steamer and the little ghosts who died on the road will come to your back and demand your life. Those ghosts will thank me for chasing you all the way, and I will also thank them for chasing you to death." Tang finally nodded to Xiaoho and said, "I wish you a happy retirement and a wonderful death." After saying this, he turned and left the meadow, disappearing into the forest. Xiaoho silently looked at the deserted meadow and the forest gently blown by the summer wind. Without saying anything more, he gently lifted the reins and rode toward Tiang City. The wind blowing from the wilderness stirred the forest, the deep grass, the military flag on top of Tiang City, and the white hair that peeked out from the edge of his helmet. Since ancient times, famous generals were like beauties. They were not allowed to see their white hair, but his hair had already turned white. The newly renovated house by Yanming Lake welcomed the first group of guests. Princess Liu, her stepson, and Situilan. Ning Ke welcomed Situilan's arrival very much. He had no problem with the poor savage prince, but he inevitably felt that the visit of Princess Liu was a little troublesome. He had a good relationship with Liu, but he was very clear that she would definitely bring him trouble. Sure enough, when only he and Liu were left in the quiet study, trouble came. Outside the carved window of the study, there were several old trees, shading the summer. The breeze was pleasant, and even the sound of cicadas in the forest was not annoying. Liu held a bowl of herbal tea and looked at the faintly visible lake view outside the window. She smiled and said, "The cicadas make the forest quieter. This house is really good. No wonder a miser like you is willing to spend so much money." Ning Ke sighed and thought, is this really the place to start talking? He walked to Liu's side and said, "Thank you, Your Highness, for sending these big trees." The old trees in the house by Yanming Lake were all from Liu's royal fief. These trees were very valuable. The cost of transporting them out of the mountain and back to Chang'an City was a terrifying figure. The most important thing was that there were many rare ancient trees that could not be bought even with money. Ning Ke was indeed a person of high status, but Liu was the dignified princess of the Tang Empire. She did not need to carefully please him, and such a heavy gift naturally had to be returned. After all, they are just wild things and not worth much. Liu walked to the display shelf in the study and looked at the antiques on the shelf. Her expression changed slightly and she said with a chuckle, "When I was a child, I asked my father for this brush washer, but he said he gave it to her, so it was not good to get it back. I did not expect to see it in your study today." Ning Ke looked at the stone brush washer and said, "If you like it, you can take it." Liu said with slight mockery, "Why should I take what she gave you?" In Chang'an City, only Liu and her brother dared to call the Empress her. Of course, this could only be a private address. Obviously, Li Yu did not care about letting Ning Ke see her true attitude towards the Empress. Ning Ke did not reply. Li Yu looked at him and said with a smile, I heard that you have been to the palace often recently. You must be very familiar with her? Ning Ke said, Indeed, I am much more familiar with her than before. Li Yu asked, What kind of person do you think she is? Ning Ke answered directly, I don't know. After a moment of silence, Li Yu said with a self-mocking smile, I have been opposing her for so many years, but I have never been able to see what she is thinking, let alone you. Ning Ke shook his head and said, Why think so much? Li Yu took a sip of the herbal tea in the cup and frowned slightly. Then she smiled and said, It's delicious. Is this the mulberry tea made by Sang Sang? I have heard her mention it several times, but this is the first time I have tasted it. Listening to Her Highness talking about family matters, Ning Ke suddenly felt much more relaxed. He was prepared to explain how to make mulberry tea and emphasize that it was his own invention. However, he did not expect that Li Yu's next sentence would come so quickly. The atmosphere took a sudden turn for the worse. My thoughts are very simple, you know. Li Yu looked into Ning Ke's eyes calmly and persistently. Ning Ke did not avoid her gaze and said, I have also told you my thoughts. Li Yu said, I know that you have some problems with the imperial military. Ning Ke said, I admit it, but the problems can always be solved, and I don't need to care about them. I don't think that after you killed Huang Xing and Yushui Zhu, you can still have a good talk with Xia Ho and let those old generals in the military think that you are kind and harmless. Li Yu said, these problems cannot be solved. Maybe you really don't need to care about them, but if you want to continue doing something, you have to care about them. Ning Ke said, Of course I will not admit what Her Highness said. As for the little friction between me and General Xia Ho, I believe it will not last for too long. Everyone knows that Xia Ho is on the Empress's side. Li Yu said, The Empress is trying to win you over because she does not want the dispute between Xia Ho and the Academy to continue to expand. But are you willing? Ning Ke thought to himself, I also know that the Empress is Xia Ho's sister. Eldest brother had already told him, so he would not reveal this big secret in front of Li Yu. Li Yu said, If the hatred between you and Xia Ho is only the conflict in the wilderness, since Mr. First has already set the tone, I hope you are willing. Ning Ke frowned slightly and did not understand why she would choose to stand on the same side as the Empress. Li Yu said in a low voice, Only some young generals in the army are willing to be loyal to me. Hua Shanhua leads the Hebei Prefecture army, and it is too difficult for him to accumulate military merits. With his current qualifications, it is impossible for him to take over Xia Ho's position in the northeast border military. But since Xia Ho is willing to retire, it is a good thing for me. So I do not want other things to interfere with this process. This explanation was very naked and sincere. Even Ning Ke could not help but be slightly stunned. After a moment, he sighed and said, This kind of thing is really boring. Li Yu said with slight mockery, You are indeed a student of the headmaster of the academy. You even feel that the throne of the Tang Empire is boring. Ning Ke said, I have told you before, don't pay too much attention to the attitude of the person who entered the human realm from the academy. I have teachers, senior brothers and sisters, His Majesty in the palace, the nation master in the temple, Huang Yang in the temple, and Su Shi and the other old generals in the army. Whether the throne should be passed to your brother or the prince born by the Empress is ultimately these people's opinion. Li Yu looked at him quietly and suddenly said, But have you ever thought that whether it is father, the headmaster of the academy, or the old generals in the army, they will all leave one day? Why does the academy want you to enter the human realm? Why does father think so highly of you? Why is Su Shi so vigilant against you? Actually, it is all because of the same reason. No one can resist the fate of Haotian. As time passes, the Tang Empire will eventually lose them. Some people are worried that you will become an evil eagle without the suppression of the hunter and harm the world after they pass away. But the headmaster of the academy and father are silent. They want to protect you, torture you, and polish you. They want you to turn from a young eagle into an eagle and protect the Tang Empire without them. After struggling and thinking, there is still one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 442. He left the city of Wei, came to Chang'an, entered the academy, and finally entered the back mountain. But before he could learn anything, Ning Ke had to take the students from the front yard to the frontier fortress in the north of Yan Kingdom. Now that he thought about it, this must be the result of the discussion between the emperor and the academy. When he came to the wilderness, he received the news from the Imperial Center Administration that the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine deep in the wilderness was opened and the tomes of arcane appeared. Ning Ke had to go north. After so many tests and even tortures, he finally inherited the mantle of youngest uncle, which was the embodiment of the will of the headmaster of academy. His Majesty and Master Yen Sei did not hesitate to hand over the big tactical array of Chang'an to him. These things all proved the trust and expectation of the imperial court and the academy in him. Ning Ke was very clear about this, so he was not surprised when he heard what Li Yu said. But he had never thought about it carefully, because as indifferent and ruthless as he was, he still felt that those deaths were sad things. I don't think that will happen in a short period of time. Ning Ke said. Li Yu said bitterly, maybe what I said is not pleasant to hear. Sometimes when I think about the future, I feel nervous and sad. But people will grow old and die. My father is in the prime of his life, but his health is not as good as it looks. Before I married the Golden Tent, I asked the Imperial Academy of Medicine about my father. My father was seriously injured years ago and his condition has been worsening ever since. The medicine can't do anything about it, so he often coughs. Ning Ke thought of the scene when he was with His Majesty in the Imperial study. He thought of those inexplicably happy curses of idiots and the occasional coughs. He was silent. Although Su Shi is a powerhouse at the peak state of martial arts, he is already very old. And the whole world knows that he has an old lung disease. No matter how he nourishes himself, it can't be cured. The headmaster of academy is the most stable and powerful mountain in the Tang Empire. It seems that he will stay green forever. But he has lived for more than 100 years. Can he live forever? Li Yu looked at Ning Ke and said calmly, life, old age, sickness and death are irreversible. The headmaster of academy and my father are thinking about the future. What right do we have not to think about it? Ning Ke took the cold mulberry tea from her hand and walked back to the desk. He put his hands on the edge of the desk and thought for a moment. He said, at least there are many years. Li Yu frowned slightly. Ning Ke said, the headmaster and His Majesty can live for at least another 10 or 20 years. At that time, I will be much stronger than I am now. Perhaps eldest brother or second brother can take the position after the headmaster leaves. I think the Tang Empire will be as strong as it is now. So I don't think there is anything to think about now. Li Yu said, I have told you before that my request to you is very simple. When the succession of the Tang Empire requires the Academy's help, please stand by my side. Ning Ke did not turn around. He looked up at the ancient trees outside the window and the Yanming Lake in the distance. He thought about how the lake looked like in winter, Xia Ho, and the inseparable blood relationship between Xia Ho and the Empress. He said, if that day comes, I will not stand on the Empress' side. Li Yu was somewhat satisfied with his answer, but she still regretted that he did not directly express his attitude. Looking at his back, a faint look of disappointment appeared on her beautiful face. She sighed softly and said, if I had known that things would develop like this, I would not have let you go. Ning Ke turned around and said, at that time, you and I were from different worlds, and I was not a person who was willing to be caught. So don't feel regretful. Li Yu walked slowly to him and looked into his eyes, as if she wanted to see something. If I didn't catch you, I could stay with you. I have been thinking, if I did not stand up beside the bonfire, would we have stayed in the same world? Ning Ke recalled the bonfire at the entrance of Northern Mountain Road, the maidservants and fairy tales beside the bonfire, as well as those conversations. He curled his lips and said, "The key is that the price you gave me was too low." Hearing his words, Li Yu clearly sensed that he was a little emotional and evasive, a little regretful and a little secretly happy. She smiled and said, "If I had known that your little handmaiden would become the great divine priest of light of the Westhill Divine Palace, I would definitely have offered the highest price." Ning Ke smiled and asked, "What's the highest price?" In the eyes of women in the world, Ning Ke's appearance was considered fresh, but not handsome. He was extremely cute when he smiled, especially with his freckles and dimples. The girls in the House of Red Sleeves were fascinated by the young man's dimples, freckles and freshness. At this time, his smile was reflected in the depths of Li Yu's eyes. She subconsciously raised her hand and touched the dimples on his face. She said, "Your freckles are getting lighter." Ning Ke felt the smooth fingertips on his face and was slightly absent-minded. He said, "Sang Sang often used a lot of powder in Chenjinji Cosmetics store, so she would give some to me." "Is that the reason?" Li Yu suddenly came to her senses and quickly withdrew her hand. "I suffered a loss." Ning Ke looked at her and said seriously. Li Yu's cheeks were slightly red, but there was no shyness in her bright eyes. She slightly raised her head and joked, "If you are not afraid of Sang Sang's jealousy, you can touch it back." Ning Ke coughed and with great difficulty suppressed the urge to reach out and touch her smooth and slightly pointed chin. He put his hands behind his back and asked, "Speaking of which, where is Sang Sang?" "She must be telling stories to Xiaoman." Li Yu rolled her eyes and said, "I won't tease you anymore. I'm going to find her." Ning Ke and Situilan walked along Yanming Lake and chatted casually in the cool lake breeze. They only had to be careful to brush away the irritating willow branches that came at their faces from time to time. Situilan was a little disappointed because she did not participate in the spring war in the wilderness. But this disappointment was a little absurd in Ning Ke's eyes. "I don't know what you are thinking. What's the point of fighting? You read books in the academy every day and learn needlework in the mansion every day. Don't you feel bored? I am a man, not a girl. If I were you, I would definitely not feel bored." "That's not what you said when we were in the Blue Water Battalion." The two walked on the bluestone path. It was just like last year when they walked on the white pebble beach by the blue sea at the frontier fortress. The calm and pure atmosphere surrounded the young man and woman. "Stay away from her," Ning Ke suddenly said. Situilan looked up at him and knew that he was referring to the princess. She was puzzled and said, "I don't understand what you mean. What do you want to say?" There were willow branches hanging down from the lake bank and brushing his cheeks. Ning Ke was a little annoyed and reached out to pick one. He said, "You were young and could ride with her on the long street and be proud. But if you really want to be a female general of the Tang Empire, you have to understand that it's different from a female army." Situilan thought quietly for a long time and looked up at him. She said, "I want to be a female general of the Tang Empire, not someone else's." Ning Ke saw that she understood what he meant and nodded with appreciation. He handed over the grasshopper woven from willow branches and said, "This is your reward." Situilan took the lovely grasshopper and was very happy. She said, "You are really fast." Ning Ke picked up another willow branch and said, "When Sang Sang was young and often cried because of hunger, I would find some leaves and weave some gadgets to make her happy. It's faster to make more gadgets." Situilan looked at his expression and said jokingly, "Look at the lake and you will find how annoying you are at this time." Ning Ke said proudly, "I am good at it." "Why shouldn't I be proud?" Situilan blinked and asked, "Are you proud because of your dexterity or because you made Sang Sang happy?" Ning Ke said, "Both, but the latter is more." Situilan gently coughed and asked with a smile, "During those days, people in Chang and City had been talking about you and the calligraphy addict. Many people, including Wuxia, had seen you holding hands with the calligraphy addict." Why did you get together with your little handmaiden a few days later? It was already surprising that Sang Sang suddenly became the miss of the Grand Secretary's mansion. This change is even more surprising. Ning Ke was stunned and asked, "Can't I?" Situ Ilan raised the willow branch grasshopper in front of her eyes and looked very naughty. She said, "Why not? It's just that many people said you played with the calligraphy addict's feelings. They are very ashamed of you." Ning Ke waved his arms and said angrily, "How did I play with her? How did I play with her? I have become like this. What else do you want me to do? Besides, when did I hold hands with her?" He stretched out his arms in the lake wind and protested indignantly, "We did swim together, but where did my arms go? I didn't even touch her hands." The new house by the Yanming Lake was completed. Under Sang Sang's strong request, Ning Ke did not hire stewards or maids, nor did he waste money on any opening ceremony. But since Li Yu brought Ilan here, Ning Ke thought that he had to put on a show. So he returned to the back of the mountain of the academy and invited his senior brothers and sisters to be guests. Just as he had expected, his senior brothers and sisters in the back of the mountain of the academy were not interested in this kind of thing at all. He felt a little relaxed, but also a little embarrassed. Unexpectedly, the next day Chen Pipi came with Tang Xiaotang. Ning Ke rowed the boat. Looking at the fat man lying on the bow, sighing and urging, he felt angry. He thought that it was Sang Sang who rowed on the lake and he enjoyed it. But after he came, he had to serve him. What kind of logic was this? Although he thought so, he could not say it out. Because the academy was most particular about, to be exact, second brother was most particular about brotherhood. Since Chen Pipi was the senior brother, he could naturally ask Ning Ke to do things. Even if Ning Ke had any opinions about it, he did not have the guts to reason with second brother. "I say, can't you hurry up? Didn't you eat today?" Chen Pipi looked at the boat that was about to disappear into the lotus field and saw Tang Xiaotang's figure on the boat. He was so anxious that he almost jumped and scolded Ning Ke through the oar and said angrily, "You ate all the lunch. Where can I go to eat? See you tomorrow." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 443. 4 people and 2 boats, floating on the lake. It was a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, Tang Xiaotang and Sang Sang were in the same boat, so Chen Pipi had to take the same ticket as Ning Quebec. The boat was faintly discernible in the lotus field. Tang Xiaotang and Sang Sang were happily talking about something with some small things in their hands. Chen Pipi looked ahead and thought that it was such a pity that he couldn't get close to Xiaotang after he saved her from the clutches of his third senior sister. "What are they talking about?" Chen Pipi asked. Ning Ke said, "A few days ago, I made some small things with willow branches for Sang Sang. I haven't made them for many years, but she still likes them very much. She must show them to her friends." Chen Pipi was slightly startled. He looked back at Ning Ke beside the oar and said, "I didn't know that you are a guy who knows how to please girls." Ning Ke sneered, "Do you think everyone is worse than a beast like you? It's been so many days. Haven't you got the girl yet?" Chen Pipi lowered his head in shame and rubbed his hands nervously. He said, "Don't talk nonsense." Ning Ke shook his head helplessly and said, "I can't tell that you are so thin-skinned just by looking at your fat face." Chen Pipi refuted with a lack of confidence, "That's because the girl is thin-skinned." The boat sailed into the depths of the lotus field. The traces left by the iron kettle by the thunder and lightning had long disappeared. The green branches and round leaves covered the sky, which was very quiet. Sang Sang and Tang Xiaotang's boat rowed to an unknown place. Ning Ke put down the oar and walked into the canopy. He handed a pot of wine to Chen Pipi and whispered, "Have you thought it through?" Chen Pipi took the wine pot and carefully took a sip. Then he frowned because of the spiciness. After a long silence, he said, "How can I think about this kind of thing? But you should know who you are. Ning Ke said calmly, although you still refuse to tell me, and I still don't know whether you are the son of the hierarch lord or the abbey dean, you are the pride and future of Haotian Taoism. Although the headmaster has raised you for so many years, you will eventually go back. Chen Pippi looked at the lotus field outside the boat and said blankly, probably. Ning Ke said, Tang Xiaotang is from the devil's doctrine. Chen Pippi said in a low voice, then what do you think we should do? Do your own things and think for yourself. Ning Ke said, I'm just reminding you that if you really want to return to Haotian Taoism, neither the West Hill Divine Palace or the Jishou Abbey will allow you to marry Tang Xiaotang. Chen Pippi looked up at him and asked, why did you choose Sang Sang instead of the calligraphy addict? That is a different kind of pain from what you are facing now. Ning Ke said bluntly, no matter what I choose, I will at most be laughed at and despised by others, or hurt the girl. But if you make the wrong choice, or if your determination is not strong enough, you will definitely face more than these, and Tang Xiaotang will be even more miserable. Chen Pippi frowned again. His round face, which was usually carefree and cheerful, showed a rare solemn expression, which eventually turned into endless sorrow. It's going to rain. He frowned and drank all the liquor in the pot as if he was drinking poison. He said with a lisp, I'll take her back to the academy first. Ning Ke stuck his head out of the canopy and saw the clear blue sky above the lotus field. There were no clouds in the sky, and it did not look like it was going to rain. Chen Pippi stroked his chest and said faintly, it's raining here. It's all your fault. It's rare for you to come out and play, but you have to mention these things that make people feel bad. The sky was clear and there was no rain. Chen Pippi, a fat young man who had always been optimistic, felt a cold rain falling in his heart. Gradually, his heart felt like it was going to be moldy. Ning Ke sympathized with his senior brother very much. After sending him and Tang Xiaotang off, he sat by the window of the study and could not help but feel sad when he thought of what Chen Pippi had said on the boat. At this moment, a wind blew from the south bank of Yanming Lake, rustling the lotus leaves in the lake and ruffling the long willows on the lake bank. The wind went around the thick trunk of the ancient tree and poured into the study. Sang Sang sat in the chair, holding a cup of herbal tea in her hand. She squinted at the lake wind that came from outside the window and said, it looks like it's really going to rain. As soon as the little handmaiden finished her words, the sound of rain suddenly sounded. The pitter-patter of rain fell from the sky, slowly and firmly washing away the summer heat in the woods of the house. It did not take long for the courtyard to be completely wet. I didn't expect it to really rain. Ning Ke took the cup of tea from her hand and drank it, moistening his throat that was a little dry because of worrying about his friend. Then he looked at the empty cup and asked, what did Tang Xiaotang say? Sang Sang hugged her thin legs and put her chin on her knees. She seriously recalled the conversation on the boat in the depths of the lotus field and said, Tang Tang said that she was a little muddle-headed. Ning Ke was slightly stunned and asked, that's it? Sang Sang said, she said that she had to ask her brother's opinion on this matter. Ning Ke thought of the powerhouse from the devil's doctrine who wore a leather coat and was as terrifying as a rock. He suddenly felt that the lake wind outside the window was a little cold and suddenly felt more sympathy for Chen Pippi. The rain in the courtyard became heavier and heavier, and the summer heat was quickly washed away. The rainwater on the lawn also accumulated more and more, converging into several thin streams that flowed towards Yanming Lake. Thousands of rivers flow into the sea, it's natural. Ning Ke said with emotion. Sang Sang raised her head and gave him a puzzled look, not understanding what he was talking about. What I want to say is that there are some things that we can only passively worry about, but we can't do anything about it. We can only silently watch it develop, and at most give our blessings. Ning Ke looked at the heavy rain outside the window and said, it's like the sky is going to rain, and the young lady is going to get married. Sang Sang thought about it and hugged her legs tighter. There was silence in the courtyard. There was no sound, only the sound of rain. At this moment, there was a sudden loud knock on the front door of the house. I told you to say it's going to rain, and now it's really going to rain. Did you not bring an umbrella? This is a guest from Houtian. You two can sleep here tonight, but don't expect me to lend you an umbrella. Sang Sang and I have set a strict rule since we were young. We can borrow people and lives, but we can't borrow two things. You can't borrow money, and you can't borrow an umbrella. The knocking in the front yard became louder and more urgent. It was obvious that the guy was not happy with the heavy rain, and he wanted to express his strong dissatisfaction by knocking. Ning Ke was too lazy to care. He still imitated the eldest brother and walked slowly to the door, and kept nagging to make fun of the guy. You want to say why you can't borrow an umbrella? Hey, this is a very long story, and I don't know if you are interested to hear it. You shouldn't have left just now. Oh, my God, why is it you? Ning Ke's voice stopped abruptly when he pushed open the courtyard door. He looked outside with his mouth open, and his hands were still holding the heavy courtyard door. He was so stiff that he looked like he had been struck by lightning. He really felt like he had been struck by lightning at this time. It was not Chen Pipi and Tang Xiaotang outside the house. It was a young Taoist girl in a blue Taoist robe. The young Taoist girl was soaked by the heavy rain. Her wide blue Taoist robe was wet, and her messy and sticky hair was on her forehead. She looked very embarrassed. She was holding a horsetail whisk in her hand, and the tail of the whisk was on her left arm, dripping water. No matter how one looked at it, being drenched was a very embarrassing scene. Therefore, the girl's eyes were no longer as cold and proud as before, but with a bit of anger and shame. But in fact, she did not look embarrassed at all. Her eyebrows were still so beautiful. No matter how the rain fell on her pale cheeks, no matter how angry her eyes were, she was still beautiful. Because she was recognized as one of the 3 most beautiful girls in the world. Ning Ke pushed open the courtyard door and saw a beautiful girl in the heavy rain. Her cheeks were pale, and her hair was slightly messy. She looked timid and pitiful. Ning Ke suddenly thought of many beautiful stories in Strange Stories, and then remembered a song that kept repeating, "You are so beautiful." Ning Ke believed that the beautiful Taoist girl outside the door was definitely more powerful than those vixens in Strange Stories. He also believed that she was more beautiful than those vixens. But he was not tempted. Because he did not want to court death. He did not even want to see her at all. Even though his cultivation state was much stronger now, he still did not want to see her. Therefore, his first reaction was to close the door. However, just as he was about to close the 2 heavy courtyard doors with all his strength, he found that the doors were many times heavier than before. Because the Taoist girl in the rain stretched out a palm and placed it in the gap of the door. Ning Ke did not dare to think about how much blood he would lose under her Taoist sword if he clamped her hand and made it bleed. But he still did not stop closing the door. Just as the 2 heavy courtyard doors were about to clamp the Taoist girl's palm, a faint light suddenly appeared on the tiny hand that was dripping with rainwater. There was a sudden gust of wind at the courtyard door, and the heavy rain falling on the courtyard from the air suddenly stopped. An indifferent and powerful aura gushed out from that palm, instantly evaporating the rainwater and an extremely small green leaf on the surface of the palm. Then, it shattered everything it touched. There was a dull and loud sound at the courtyard door. The people in the distant Chang and city who were sheltering from the rain under the eaves looked curiously at the Yanming Lake where the sound came from. They wondered if the loud thunder had killed anyone. No one died. But the 2 doors were destroyed. Ning Ke looked at the big gap in the courtyard door and wanted to cry but had no tears. The splinters of the courtyard door splashed all over his body, and even his face was covered with splinters. He looked very pitiful under the washing of the rain. Looking at the fresh fragrant wood stubble gradually turning from white to gray in the rain, he thought of the money he had spent on the 2 courtyard doors. His expression became extremely painful. He looked up at the beautiful Taoist girl in the rain and trembled with heartache. He shouted angrily, "Yi Hongyu, you must pay for my door." Consecutive 2-word chapter names. That's the end of it. Today's chapter names made me exhale deeply and feel extremely good. Today is Friday, I will accompany my parents to drink and play, so there is only one chapter left. I will write some more. There will be updates tomorrow and Saturday, because I asked for leave a few days ago. I will make up for it tomorrow. Have a good weekend. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 444. The young Taoist priest in the rain was naturally Yi Hongyu. That night, after cutting open Chen Bachi's eyes with a piece of thin paper, she left the Peach Mountain in indigo clothes and left the West Hill under the cover of the night. After a long journey to Chang'an and a heavy rain, she became even more exhausted and haggard. When she heard Ning Kei's question, she could not help but say angrily, "What can I do if I don't compensate you?" Looking at the indifference and anger in her eyes, Ning Kei did not dare to do anything to her. After all, this beautiful female Taoist priest in front of him was the person he feared the most in the cultivation world. He brushed off the sawdust on his face and said in a distressed tone, "If you don't want to pay, then don't. Why are you so serious?" Yi Hongyu pulled him away from the door and barged into the courtyard. She said, "Find me a room. I want to stay." Ning Kei looked at the young Taoist priest walking into the deep courtyard and was stunned for a while before he finally came to his senses. He hurried to catch up with her and asked with a bitter face, "Why did you come to Chang'an? Why did you come to Chang'an? How did you know I lived here? Are you looking for a place to stay? How long do you plan to stay?" In the corridor, Yi Hongyu suddenly stopped and said, "I need some time to think about some questions." Ning Kei asked, "What? How long do you need to think?" Yi Hongyu reached out to pull the hair that was dripping from her forehead and said, "It shouldn't be too short." Ning Kei looked at the beautiful girl in front of him and said nervously, "You are the West Hill Tao addict. There are many people in the world who want to flatter you. You can think of anywhere in the world. I guess you know the way to the Revelation Institute, the Lenk Temple and the Jishou Abbey. Why do you have to come to Chang'an? Do you really have to do it in my house?" Yi Hongyu said, "Because Chang'an is the only place in the world that the Divine Hall cannot enter." Ning Kei gasped. He looked at her and asked in a trembling voice, "You betrayed us too?" Yi Hongyu frowned slightly and said, "Why did you use the word also?" Ning Kei said, "The great divine priest of light also lived in Chang'an for half a year last year." Yi Hongyu was silent and did not answer him. She turned and continued to walk to the end of the corridor. Her steps were steady and calm, leaving a trail of water in the corridor. Ning Kei quickly followed her and shouted angrily, "Even if you didn't betray us, you must have offended some bigwigs in the Divine Hall. Then why should I offend those bigwigs in the Divine Hall? Even you have offended them and had to run away from home to avoid trouble?" Yi Hongyu continued to walk along the winding corridor in the courtyard. She looked at the forest outside the corridor in the rain and said calmly, "I said in the wilderness that I would kill you." Yi Hongyu said, "The arrow you shot at Longqing on the snow cliff will be cancelled. What do you think?" Yi Hongyu said, "Yes, you can celebrate. Now that I've said that I won't try to kill you, you can start celebrating. The premise of this sentence is that she can kill you if she says she wants to." It was a simple sentence, but it contained a lot of pride, confidence, and even narcissism. Ning Kei was also a narcissistic person, but he had to put away all his narcissism when he was with the Tao addict, because he knew how terrible she was. At this time, hearing that she didn't try to kill him, although he was happy, he also felt a little humiliated. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and asked tentatively, "Are you hurt?" Yi Hongyu did not hide it from him and said directly, "I haven't recovered from my injuries in the wilderness." The seemingly silent but extremely dangerous battle with Master Lotus at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine would often appear in Ning Kei's mind. He was very clear about how important the Tao addict was in that battle and how serious her injuries were. However, he did not expect it to last until now. "No wonder I feel that your state of cultivation seems to be much weaker. When I opened the courtyard door just now, I saw you drenched like a stray puppy in the rain. It was very pitiful. I was wondering why I felt that you were pitiful. Ning Ke looked at the girl's pale cheeks and thought of the past when they fought side by side in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He felt a little emotional, but after a moment, he forced himself to calm down and said in a low voice, "But since you are so weak now, I don't think I have enough bargaining chips. What's in it for me to take you in?" They had reached the end of the 9-turn corridor. If they went further, they would be in the flower hall and the study. Yi Hongyu stopped and turned to look at Ning Quebec. She said calmly, "If you think that my conditions are not enough, why don't we fight again?" Ning Ke looked at her eyes that were like autumn water for a long time. He wanted to see a trace of uncertainty in the depths of her eyes, but he did not see it. If he could see a trace of uncertainty in the Tao addict's eyes, he would attack without any scruples, hesitation, or pity, just like when he shot Long Qing by the Daming Lake. Because he was a cold-blooded and heartless person. He knew very well that the Tao addict was a rare person in the cultivation world who was as cold-blooded and heartless as himself. If there was a chance, no one would be willing to let the other go. Regrettably, Ning Ke saw tiredness, haggard, and even lost and perplexed in the girl's eyes, but he did not see her uncertainty about him. So Ning Ke shook his head and said with a smile, "You must be joking." Yi Hongyu looked into his eyes and said seriously, "You know I am not joking." Ning Ke was sure that Yi Hongyu's cultivation had been greatly damaged after she had forcefully lowered her state at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He had reached the upper state of the see-through state after he had cultivated in seclusion in the cliff cave. In terms of cultivation, he was already above Yi Hongyu, but he was still not sure that he could defeat her. He did not know the tragic experience of Chenbachi, the commander of the upper state of the see-through state. He was just like the beasts in Min Mountain who felt the danger. So he continued to smile and shake his head. Then, like a very enthusiastic host, he stretched out his arm and led Yi Hongyu out of the corridor and into the main hall. Sang Sang stood at the threshold and watched him walk in with a drenched Taoist girl. Her face was full of curiosity and she asked, "Do you want to boil the bath water?" "Don't panic. Let me introduce you to the guest first." Ning Ke coughed twice and calmed himself down. He pointed at Yi Hongyu and said, "Don't be fooled by her messy appearance. In fact, she is a very great person. She is the powerful Tao addict who kills without blinking an eye that I often mention to you." Yi Hongyu said, "You still mention me often after returning to Chang'an?" Ning Ke answered honestly, "If I want to kill you, I will naturally talk about you often." Yi Hongyu nodded and said, "That makes sense." Ning Ke looked at the vigilant expression on Sang Sang's face and said with a smile, "She is indeed very scary. But only I need to be afraid." "You don't have to be afraid, because she is your senior sister." Then, he walked to Sang Sang's side and put his arm around her shoulder. He said to Yi Hongyu, "My Sang Sang." Yi Hongyu felt that this petite handmaiden did not match the image of Sang Sang that she had imagined. But she did not show any expression of surprise. She calmed herself down and gently shook her horsetail whisk to greet junior sister Sang Sang. At this time, she was still wet. Rainwater dripped down her temples and horsetail whisk. The drenched Taoist robe clung to her curvy body, exuding a charming and seductive aura. But her expression was so calm and composed, like a dignified Taoist. Sang Sang was a little flustered. She half squatted down and slightly bowed to return the greeting. Then, she stood up and looked at Yi Hongyu's beautiful face and seductive curves under the wet clothes. She could not help but sigh softly, full of envy and yearning. Ning Ke was much calmer than before. He finally noticed that the Tao addict's green Taoist robe clung to her body. His eyes became brighter and full of envy. Yi Hongyu looked at them expressionlessly and asked, "Do I look good?" The master and the handmaiden nodded and praised, "Yes, you look good." Hearing this answer and looking at the two's confident expressions, Yi Hongyu could no longer maintain her cold expression like that of a glacier goddess. She took a deep breath and said, "I will go take a shower first, and then I will let you look to your heart's content." In the night, the pitter-patter of rain came from outside the window. Ning Ke opened his eyes and looked at the carved ceiling on the bed. He had no intention of falling asleep. He said, "If she really wants to stay here, it will be very troublesome." Sang Sang slept on the other side of the bed. When she heard this, she lifted the thin veil and leaned against the headboard. She said very seriously, "Yes, it seems that we really need to hire a maid." Ning Ke naturally would not allow Sang Sang to serve others. He said, "We definitely need to hire a maid, but it is not troublesome. The trouble I am talking about is more troublesome." Sang Sang asked curiously, "What kind of trouble is that?" Ning Ke thought of the murderous figure in red that flitted across the forest under the snow cliff in the depths of the wilderness. He thought of the divine light above the Daming Lake and the bloody mess in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He felt a strong chill even on this rainy summer night. His body suddenly became colder and colder. He had encountered many dangers in his life. After returning to Cheng and from the city of Wei and entering the world of cultivators, he had also encountered many dangers. But the one who really made him feel the shadow of death was the Tao addict, Yi Hongyu. In the cultivation world, he had seen many powerhouses with profound states. Yi Hongyu was definitely not the strongest among them, but she gave him the feeling that she was the most dangerous. Because Yi Hongyu had a firm Taoist heart and was as ruthless as him. She really understood what it meant to fight and understand life and death. What happened in the West Hill Divine Palace that made Yi Hongyu flee in the night and resolutely seek refuge in Cheng, and despite the hostility between the West Hill and the Tang Empire? There were not many bigwigs in the Divine Hall who could make the Tao addict so embarrassed. Was it the great Divine Priest of Judgment or the Hierarch Lord? Ning Ke was very clear that if this matter was not handled well, it would really be a big trouble. Sang Sang said worriedly, "Then how can we solve this trouble? If Yi Hongyu can't solve the trouble, I naturally can't solve it either. But fortunately, I know many people who can solve the trouble of the West Hill Divine Palace." Ning Ke said, "I will hand this trouble over tomorrow." Nothing happened that night, but the two did not sleep well. Especially Ning Ke, thinking of such a dangerous person as Yi Hongyu sleeping in a guest room dozens of feet away, he felt nervous and uneasy. He did not fall asleep until the early hours of the morning. When he woke up, the summer rain had stopped and the sky was already bright. He hastily washed up and quietly left Yanming Lake with Sang Sang. They took a horse carriage to the academy. There will be more today, but the time is uncertain. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 445. Ever since he became a student of the second floor of the academy, Ning Ke rarely went to the front yard. That was because it was awkward to interact with his former classmates. However, he was in a hurry to report the situation and solve the problem. He also remembered that it was late and the students in the front yard were in class, so he did not go through the side door. Instead, he brought Sang Sang to the meadow, past the stone sign, and entered through the main door. The rain stopped, and the sun shone brightly. There was the sound of reading coming from one study room, and the sound of debate coming from another study room. The front yard of the academy was enveloped in a peaceful atmosphere. At this moment, an old voice came from classroom 3. The most basic and primitive is the most important. If you can't even understand a straight line, how can you understand the more difficult three-dimensional composition? What is a straight line? A straight line is an infinite straight line. Let me show you. After a while, a female professor wearing a blue gown walked out of classroom 3 with a piece of chalk in her hand. She looked serious and seemed to be drawing a straight line in the air. There was no end to the straight line. The female professor kept drawing with the chalk in her hand. Her footsteps were slow, calm, and persistent. Soon, she left classroom 3 and walked towards the instructor's lounge at the back of the academy. Seeing this, Ning Ke was dumbfounded. He patted Sang Sang's shoulder and led her to the lounge behind the female professor, forgetting why he had come to the academy. In order to visit Prince Long Qing in Chang'an, Chao Jifeng, the associate professor of etiquette, used the excuse that the qi of heaven and earth had changed and it was not suitable for classes. At that time, Ning Ke felt that the instructors of the academy were extremely absurd. Today, this female professor who kept walking with a piece of chalk made him even more dumbfounded. Was it okay to be lazy like this? The female professor suddenly stopped outside the quiet and secluded bookstore. She put down her hand that had been stretched out in the air and carefully wrapped the chalk in a piece of paper. Then, she stuffed it into her sleeve. She looked at Ning Ke and said, "You're here?" Ning Ke hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, Professor." The female professor tidied up her blue gown and said casually, "Iching is already blind. Just put him back." Ning Ke knew that the female professor was related to the sword Garrett of South Jin Kingdom. Since Chao Xiaoshu was still alive and Lu Yiqing was blind, he had already paid the price. Under such circumstances, no matter how arrogant the academy was, there was no reason for them to continue imprisoning him. If they really wanted to put Lu Bai's brother under house arrest until he was old, did they really think that the Sage of Sword had no temper? The female professor looked at him and asked, "Is there a problem?" "No problem." Ning Ke said respectfully, "I will go to the back of the mountain to ask the teacher." The female professor said, "The headmaster wants me to ask for your opinion. Do you have any questions?" Ning Ke was stunned and said, "I have no problem." The female professor smiled, the wrinkles on her face like flowers, and said, "Is it all right?" Ning Ke said seriously, "I will." They followed the stone path up the cloud gate array and entered the back of the mountain of the academy. They walked around the mirror lake and looked at the waterfall. Ning Ke bowed and said, "Yi Hongyu has come to Chang'an." The only response he got was silence, as well as the wind blowing from the valley towards the thatched cottage. There was someone in the cottage, but no one was willing to talk to him. The headmaster of the academy sat in the cottage, motionless despite the wind blowing around him. His hair and beard fluttered in the wind, and he looked intoxicated, like an immortal. However, what was placed in front of him was not a zither, but a messy dining table. Eldest brother and second brother sat beside the headmaster of the academy. The news that the Tao addict had left the Westhill Divine Palace and come to Chang, and did not surprise the three people in the cottage at all, let alone shock them. Ning Ke thought in distress, "It seems that this can really solve the problem. However, you think it is a small matter, but for me, it is a big headache." He coughed twice and said loudly again, "Ahem, she is living in my house now." Second brother looked at him coldly and said unhappily, "Can't you see that the teacher is doing something important?" Ning Ke thought to himself, what important matter could there be in front of a table full of leftovers? It is nothing more than the headmaster of the academy bragging about his cooking skills, and you and eldest brother are flattering him. The headmaster of the academy waved to the outside of the cottage and said, "The strawberry smoothie is just about to melt. It is the most delicious time. You are lucky, come in and have a bowl." Ning Ke was not in the mood to eat the strawberry smoothie, so he helplessly took Sang Sang into the cottage. Second brother looked at him and sighed in his heart. He walked to the table and moved the leftovers aside. Then, he half knelt down and began to divide the strawberry smoothie in the big porcelain bowl into plates. The first plate was, of course, dedicated to the great teacher, the second to the great eldest brother, and the third to the great second brother. There was not much smoothie left in the big porcelain bowl. Ning Ke scooped it into a plate and was about to take it aside to eat. Unexpectedly, he heard the headmaster of the academy say, "Give it to the girl." Ning Ke was startled and handed the plate of smoothie to Sang Sang with a bitter face. Sang Sang smiled embarrassedly and then picked up the bamboo spoon. She scooped a spoonful of smoothie and put it into her mouth. After tasting it carefully for a moment, a happy smile appeared on her slightly tanned face. Ning Ke asked curiously, "Is it really that delicious?" Sang Sang held the plate in one hand and the spoon in the other. She nodded seriously. Ning Ke lowered his voice and said, "Feed me." Sang Sang looked at the headmaster of the academy and said with her head down, "This is for me." Ning Ke was annoyed and sneered, "Eat more if it's delicious." The headmaster of the academy was very happy to see Sang Sang eating happily. He waved his hand and said, "Eat less even if it's delicious. Girl, the coldness in your body has not been completely dispelled. It's not good to eat too much of these cold things." Sang Sang gently agreed and carefully picked out the strawberry pieces from the smoothie. The headmaster of the academy seemed to remember Ning Ke's existence at this time and asked, "What did you just say?" Ning Ke said respectfully, "The Tao addict came to Chang'an and is now at my home. I don't know what happened in the West Hill Divine Palace that forced her to leave Peach Mountain." Second brother said indifferently, "Even the Divine Priest of Light could leave West Hill. It's not hard to imagine that Yi Hong Yu was forced to leave West Hill." Ning Ke said, "But the West Hill will definitely know that she came to Chang'an. What if they want her?" Second brother frowned slightly and said unhappily, "The West Hill once asked for your Sang Sang. Did you give her to you?" Ning Ke said, "That's different. Yi Hong Yu is not my family." At this moment, eldest brother said with a gentle smile, "Since the Tao addict is also in Chang'an, why not let her become a disciple, like Xiaotang?" The headmaster of the academy laughed and said, "I heard that the little girl is good. Ask her if she is willing to learn from me." Ning Ke was stunned. He did not expect that the headmaster would propose such an idea so casually. He thought of Chen Pippi's story and the time when Prince Long Qing came to the second floor to take the exam as promised. He could not help but speculate that the teacher's greatest hobby in this life was to make all the genius disciples of Haotian Taoism his own students. What kind of hobby was that? Of course, Ning Ke did not want Yi Hong Yu to enter the academy. But since it was the headmaster's idea, he had no right to make any suggestions as a student. Suddenly, he thought of the headmaster of the academy talking about the cold air in Sang Sang's body. He suddenly realized that he had not been able to cure Sang Sang's old illness all these years and had forgotten that there was such an immortal in the back of the mountain of the academy. "Headmaster, can Sang Sang's old illness be cured?" The headmaster of the academy looked at Sang Sang, who was concentrating on picking strawberries, and sighed. He said, "The cold air in this girl's body is congenital and caused by the extremely cold rain. She has suffered a lot these years. Even the best doctor in the world can do nothing about it." Ning Ke thought that Sang Sang's illness had decreased a lot in the past 2 years. Wasn't it self-healing? He could not help but panic and said, "Headmaster, you can't just stand by and do nothing." The headmaster of the academy said, "I don't need to do anything about it." Ning Ke did not expect the headmaster of the academy to be so heartless. He suddenly became angry and said, "If you don't do anything, I will. I will drop out of the school." In his anger, he was still rational. Ning Ke could not think of any way to force the headmaster of the academy, who was admired by the whole world, other than dropping out of the school. The headmaster of the academy was even angrier when he heard this. He scolded, "Stupid guy, don't say that you are my student in the future. Haotian's divine light is the brightest and warmest thing in the world. Since this girl has learned the divine skill from Wei Guangming, why would she need to worry about the cold air in her body? Why would she need me to do anything?" Ning Ke suddenly felt relaxed and a little angry. He said, "Then why don't you just say it? Why do you have to say so much nonsense to tease me? Teasing people will kill you." The headmaster of the academy was so angry that his beard flew in the air. He said, "How dare you refute me? I have lived dozens of years like you. Even if we don't care about seniority, don't you know how to respect your elders?" Second brother was a serious and polite person. His expression had long become extremely ugly when he saw the headmaster and his disciple verbally fighting each other. However, it was obvious that the headmaster enjoyed this kind of quarrel, so he could only keep his mouth shut and stare at Ning Ke coldly with a murderous look. Eldest brother could not stand it anymore. He shook his head helplessly and interrupted the topic. He looked at Ning Ke and said, "Youngest brother, I heard that you bought a big house in Chang'an." "Yes," Ning Ke replied. Eldest brother did not say anything more. He lowered his head to eat the strawberries and sip the ice. In the parlor of the house by the Yanming Lake, Yi Hongyu held a wooden comb and combed her hair expressionlessly. Her green Taoist robe was still drying. She was now wearing a very ordinary summer dress of a Tang woman. Her beautiful black hair cascaded over her right shoulder. She looked much more gentle and amiable than before. Ning Ke looked at her and said, "If you refuse, I can understand." Yi Hongyu stopped combing her hair and looked at him with slight mockery. She said, "I can understand why you want me to refuse. If I enter the second floor of the academy, how can you be proud of yourself?" Ning Ke said, "Whatever you think." Yi Hongyu said, "To be a student of the headmaster of the academy is the biggest dream of every cultivator. It is the biggest temptation. I am no exception." Ning Ke felt very regretful and sighed in his heart. Yi Hongyu looked at the wooden comb in her hand quietly and said, "But unfortunately, I can only refuse." Ning Ke laughed happily and said, "I am also very regretful. Do you know why? Because it is the 250th chapter. I deliberately wrote this chapter as if it was 250. The chapter title is also very silly. I like it very much. The main thing is that I increasingly feel that this world is too noisy and stupid. So I should be more happy in the story. I wish everyone a happy weekend. See you tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 446. Ning Ke smiled very happily. However, Yi Hongyu felt that his smile was disgusting. She asked coldly, "Can you smile any happier?" Ning Ke said, "If you are willing to watch." Yi Hongyu ignored him and said, "I have said before that it is something to be proud of to be a student of the headmaster of the academy. However, there will be a war between the West Hill Divine Kingdom and the Tang Empire in the next few decades. As a member of the Divine Hall, if I become a student of the headmaster of the academy, what will I do when the war starts?" Ning Ke did not expect her to give such a reason. He frowned and said, "Long Qing once tried to enter the academy to study. I am not a good-for-nothing like Long Qing. I know how important I am to the Divine Hall, and I know the role I will play in the war." Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "I am also not an idiot like Chin Pippi. I did not even think about the trouble that my actions would bring. I just escaped from the temple and escaped to the back of the mountain of the academy." Ning Ke said, "Even so, you can just watch." Yi Hongyu said, "I believe in Haotian. My life belongs to Haotian Taoism. How can I watch when the war starts?" Ning Ke could not get used to hearing the girl talk about war. He thought to himself, "Are you a war maniac?" He could not help but mock, "If your life belongs to Haotian Taoism, then why did you run away from the Divine Hall? If someone wanted to kill you, you should have stretched out your neck and let them kill you." Yi Hongyu said, "The Divine Hall does not represent Haotian Taoism. The people in the Divine Hall are not qualified to represent the will of Haotian. At least not all of them. Furthermore, I will return one day even if I leave." "That is very honest." Ning Ke nodded. He looked into her eyes and said, "But since you may be the strongest opponent of the Tang Empire in the future, why should I let you stay in Chang'an now?" Yi Hongyu said, "I have also thought of this. So I have decided that if you become my enemy on the battlefield in the future, I will spare your life." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "It sounds interesting, but after careful study, I find that it's quite unreliable. War is not something you can just think of. The Tang Empire and the West Hill have been at peace for countless years. Even if there may be disputes in the future, it doesn't necessarily have to be a war. Even if there is a war, I don't think it will happen in the decades that we are alive. So in the end, the rewards you give me are all illusory. Yi Hongyu frowned slightly and looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. She said, haven't you noticed the changes in the cultivation world in recent decades? Ning Ke completely ignored her gaze and answered honestly, I've only been in the cultivation circle for less than 2 years. How could I care about any changes? If you have read the teachings of the West Hill or some historical classics, and have some understanding of the history of the cultivation world, you should know that cultivation is a very difficult thing. In the past 1,000 years, the number of grand cultivators who could enter the knowing destiny state was extremely few. Ning Ke said, not many now. But compared to the past, there are a lot more. Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, starting from Mr. Ku of the Academy, the cultivators in the world have continued to climb toward the knowing destiny state and even beyond. Let's not talk about the people of the generation of Divine Lord Lotus. Now, Mr. First, Mr. Second, that guy Chen Pippi, many powerhouses of the West Hill Divine Palace, 7 Leaves, my brother, the 2 temples of the Buddhism sect and countless temples of Haotian Taoism. There are already many people who have entered the knowing destiny state. Even though my state has been damaged, it is inevitable that I will enter the knowing destiny state. Yi Hongyu said as if she was saying that cabbages should be fried instead of boiled. Ning Ke shook his head. She looked at him and continued, even a guy with poor aptitude and slow comprehension like you can still advance so quickly. I think there will be a day when you will also enter the knowing destiny state. What are you trying to say? Ning Ke asked confusedly. The overall strength realm of the cultivation world has been constantly improving over the past few decades. Although the experts of the previous generation are still at the top, a new generation of experts has already emerged on the ground like the stars in the sky. Yi Hongyu said, everything in the world is fixed. Haotian's fate wheel has already arranged their positions. Why are there so many powerhouses? I can't explain it now. I only know that when the stars are crowded in the starry sky, they will definitely collide and attack each other. With so many powerhouses appearing in the world, there will always be a need for war to wipe out the weaker ones. Ning Ke was silent for a long time after listening to these words. He did not completely accept Yi Hongyu's seemingly calm but actually fanatical reasoning. But deep in his heart, he vaguely felt that something was indeed going to happen in the cultivation world. Yi Hongyu looked at his eyes quietly and said, I don't care about the fate of others. But since Haotian wants me to be one of the stars, then I must be the brightest one. Ning Ke looked up at her and said seriously, if there is a day when we really fight, then no matter who wins, let's look at the fallen stars in the sky and reminisce. Yi Hongyu's reason for refusing to enter the academy had left a shadow in Ning Ke's heart. That shadow was not a shadow, but just vaguely pointing to some mountain wonders in front of him. It did not make him feel vigilant or uneasy. Instead, it made him, like Yi Hongyu, have an infinite desire for the unknown future. But he had to hide that shadow deep in his heart, because he had more urgent things to deal with now. Today at the back of the mountain of the academy, eldest brother asked about the new house by Yanming Lake. Ning Ke casually answered, and eldest brother did not continue to ask. The conversation seemed casual, but Ning Ke knew that it was definitely not the case. Although eldest brother did not say anything from the wilderness to Chang, and Ning Ke had begun to confirm that he knew about the story between him and Xiaoho. Even if he did not know about the story from more than a decade ago, he knew about the story in the recent 2 years. Eldest brother knew what he wanted to do. He was even sure that eldest brother had vaguely guessed his intention of buying the house by Yanming Lake. But whether it was eldest brother, second brother, or the teacher, everyone at the back of the mountain of the academy remained silent about his actions. The academy respected the law of the Tang Empire. Eldest brother would not agree with Ning Ke's actions, such as the assassination of Huang Xing and Yushui Zhu, but there was no evidence to point to him. Ning Ke knew that the decision he made was not in line with the philosophy of the academy. Letting Xiaoho retire was an agreement that eldest brother had reached with him on behalf of the academy. Cutting off all the past, erasing the old stories of the devil's doctrine in West Hill, and letting the world move towards a stable future was the best choice for the Tang Empire. Unfortunately, that would never be Ning Kei's choice. The next morning, Chen Pipi brought Tang Xiaotang to the shore of Yanming Lake. He looked at the two broken gates and scratched his head in confusion. "What's going on?" he asked. The reason why he went to Yanming Lake again was that after thinking hard for a day and a night, he thought he had figured out those things. He could bravely and fearlessly answer Ning Kei's questions in the Lotus Field boat. He was anxious to show his loyalty in front of Ning Kei, so he did not care too much about the damage to the door. Since the door was broken, there was no need to wait for the owner to open the door. Chen Pipi stretched out his fat legs and kicked randomly, making the already broken door even more broken. He kicked out a space that was just big enough for a person to pass through, and then carefully held Tang Xiaotang's hand and walked in. Tang Xiaotang thought to herself that she had cultivated the divine skill of the Enlightenment doctrine. Even if these wooden stubs pierced 8,000 holes in his fat body, they would not leave a trace on her body. There was no need to be so careful. Although she thought so, the little girl had no intention of objecting. She obediently let Chen Pipi hold her hand and walked into the courtyard. The air after the rain was so fresh, and the two black and beautiful long braids kept swaying in the fresh wind. Walking through the corridor, they met Sang Sang. Chen Pipi did not want Tang Xiaotang to hear what he wanted to say to Ning Kei, so he asked Sang Sang to take Tang Xiaotang to the lake to catch frogs. Sang Sang led Tang Xiaotang to the lake bank. Suddenly, she felt as if she had forgotten something. She subconsciously looked back, only to see that Chen Pipi had already entered the main hall. Crossing the threshold, Chen Pipi saw a girl in handmaiden clothes drinking porridge at the table. He asked curiously, "A new maidservant?" Ning Kei looked up at him in shock. Chen Pipi did not wait for him to reply. He sat down at the table, tapped the porcelain bowl on the table, and said to the girl in a cotton shirt beside him, "Give me a bowl of porridge." He looked at Ning Kei and said, "That's what I said. How could you not hire 8 or 10 maidservants for such a big house by the lake?" The girl in handmaiden clothes actually got up to serve Chen Pipi porridge. Ning Kei held the porridge bowl with a very interesting expression on his face. "Sir, your porridge." The girl gently placed the porridge bowl in front of Chen Pipi. Her words were very humble, but her tone was very cold, or rather, indifferent. Chen Pipi was slightly startled when he heard the voice. He raised his head to take a look, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when he saw a beautiful and moving face. Holding the porridge bowl, Ning Kei was ready to find a corner to hide. If the two geniuses of Haotian Taoism were to fight in his own house, he would not care about what would become of these expensive furniture if he did not want to die. "Your maidservant is really beautiful," Chen Pipi praised. Then he picked up the porridge bowl and began to eat. He said with a lisp, "How much did you pay for it?" Ning Kei opened his mouth and said bitterly after a while, "I can't afford it." Chen Pipi looked at the maidservant's beauty. The more he looked, the more he liked her. The more he looked, the weirder he felt. He frowned and said, "Why does she look so familiar?" The girl drinking porridge at the table was naturally Yi Hongyu. However, her green Taoist robe was stained with wind and frost. It was also soaked by the heavy rain and washed by Sang Sang last night. Thus, she was wearing Sang Sang's handmaiden clothes. Although it was a little small, it made her look even more timid and attractive. Yi Hongyu looked at Chen Pipi and said calmly, "Sir, you were the one who gave me porridge 10 years ago. How could you forget?" Puff! Chen Pipi spat out all the porridge in his mouth. Even at such a moment, he still forced his fat neck to make sure that the porridge would not spit out on Yi Hongyu. From this, one could imagine the extent of his instinctive fear of someone. Then, he let out a mournful and strange cry, and his whole body flew into the air. He hit the thick and heavy beam, and like a rubber ball, he fell back to the ground. Without the slightest pause, he rushed out of the main hall with a whistling sound. The water and electricity were cut off for a day and a night. All the phones in the house were out of battery. I can't even wash my face or brush my teeth. I can't even flush the toilet. What a miserable world. I thought that there would be electricity, but there was no electricity. I waited until the flowers were broken and the toilet was full. At dawn, I finally plucked up the courage and climbed down the tall building in the dark. The hotel opposite was full, so I went to another hotel and finally found this room. So I updated. I will buy breakfast for my parents and pick up the leader to come to the hotel. Then I will keep an eye on the electricity. I will be very busy and sad, but I will still write. I just don't know how much I can write. Now I realize that as long as there is electricity, other difficulties are nothing. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 447. Although the house by the Yanming Lake had not been completely demolished and rebuilt, many places had been renovated. The main hall, the parlor, and the study were all newly built. The thick beam in the hall had been painted, so there should not be too much dust on it. However, it was raining dust at this time. It was hard to imagine how hard Chin Pippi had hit the beam when he jumped into the air like a frightened fat rabbit. The fat figure could not be seen in the spacious main hall, but the wind was still lingering. Ning Kei, who was sitting at the table, held the bowl of porridge and felt the sticky moisture on his face. He wanted to throw the bowl to the ground. After Chin Pippi flew out of the main hall, he flapped his sleeves and kept making strange sounds. He was like a fat bird sprinting towards its food. His feet did not touch the ground and he rushed towards the lake embankment, leaving a trail of dust behind him. If he could calm down at this time, he would find that his cultivation state seemed to have improved under the pressure of fear, and he could fly at an unprecedented speed. Tang Xiaotang and Sang Sang were playing with willow branches by the lake. The two girls were like real children, singing a song, looking childish and cute. Chin Pippi flew to Tang Xiaotang and stopped. He grabbed her hand and said, "Let's go." Tang Xiaotang looked at him with her eyes wide open and asked, "Where to?" Chin Pippi's answer was unusually concise and powerful. "Back to the academy." "Why?" Tang Xiaotang was even more puzzled. Chin Pippi said in a trembling voice, "There is a monster in this house." If she was an ordinary girl who had just fallen in love, she would not think about whether her partner's words were credible or not. Instead, she would instinctively act timid and follow him. But Tang Xiaotang was not an ordinary girl. She had vowed to become the most powerful woman in the world. Instead of being afraid, her eyes suddenly brightened when she heard that there was a monster in the house. She said happily, "If there is a monster, then we should fight it. Why should we run?" Chin Pippi looked at Tang Xiaotang's braids swaying in the wind and was extremely distressed. He wanted to run, but he had to stop. Because if Tang Xiaotang did not run, how could he run? At this moment, Ning Kei and Yi Hongyu took a shortcut from the side door of the main hall and walked towards the lake. Tang Xiaotang looked at the beautiful girl in the handmaiden uniform beside Ning Kei and was confused. She rubbed her eyes subconsciously and confirmed that it was Yi Hongyu. She could not help but be surprised, and her already bright eyes became even brighter. Brighter than the sun in the lake. She slowly clenched her fists. Chin Pippi quickly stood in front of her and said, "Calm down, calm down." Ning Kei walked to the front of the two and became angrier when he saw Chin Pippi's humble appearance. He said sarcastically, "Calm down?" Maybe she deliberately tricked you to look. Chin Pippi was a little confused. He scratched his head as if he had discovered the truth. Yi Hongyu said calmly, "Fatty Chin, do you think so too?" Chin Pippi thought about it seriously for a long time, then shook his head honestly and said, "Although we both know very well that you were indeed thinking of a way to drive me away, peeking at you was indeed my own decision. I didn't think of anything else at the time, I just wanted to humiliate you." Then he hurriedly added, because you often humiliated me in the monastery. Tang Xiaotang turned and walked to the other side of the embankment. Chen Pipi was anxious and said, I was still a child then. She was not old either. Ning Kei's gaze fell on Yi Hongyu's chest. He wondered how big it was a few years ago. Yi Hongyu felt his gaze and was slightly angry. Ning Kei coughed twice and looked at Chen Pipi. He sighed and said, it turns out that the two of you had such a past. Then I can't help you. Although you were young at that time, such an ugly behavior is really hard to accept. Sang Sang looked up at him and shook her head. She said, when you were young, you peeped at those sisters bathing. You asked me to keep watch outside the female bathhouse. Ning Kei showed an awkward expression and walked to Chen Pipi's side consciously. The electricity is on. I went home from the hotel. When the elevator stopped, I climbed up to buy food for my parents. My whole body is sore today. I am really tired. Let me write slowly. Also, today is Monday. Please vote for me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 448. Tang Xiaotang walked along the embankment to the wooden stack. After being exposed by Sang Sang, even though Ning Kei and Chen Pipi stood awkwardly together, he could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. He asked her to accompany Tang Xiaotang with the reason that he was worried. Only the three of them were left under the willow embankment. Chen Pipi looked at Tang Xiaotang walking away and shouted helplessly, Are you angry because of this? Tang Xiaotang did not turn around. Her clear and bright voice echoed on the lake. I'm not angry because of this. I'm angry because you ran away when you saw her. I'm not afraid of her. You are already in the knowing destiny state. How can you be so afraid of her? It's really embarrassing. The little girl grew up fighting with snowfield dire wolves and hot sea ferocious fish. From the shoes on her feet to the black braids behind her, every detail was full of optimistic fighting spirit. It was hard for her to understand where Chen Pipi's fear came from. Chen Pipi lowered his head to look at his toes that were exposed from the front of his robe, but he could only see his round belly. He couldn't help but feel sad. After a long silence, he said in a low voice, Ever since I was young, my state has always been higher than hers. But when it comes to a real fight, I can never beat her. Ning Kei looked at him sympathetically and asked, You didn't know she was here? Chen Pipi glanced at Yi Hongyu under the willow and said angrily, If I knew, why would I come here? Ning Kei asked confusedly, Didn't senior brother tell you? Chen Pipi shook his head. Ning Kei sighed and said, What a group of bad people. Yi Hongyu walked over from under the willow tree. Chen Pipi turned and walked to the willow tree. They passed each other. Yi Hongyu curled her lips and asked, Don't you want to catch up? Chen Pipi waved his hand and said without looking back, Later, later. Ning Kei sighed and said, It seems that he is really afraid of you. He doesn't even dare to say such shameless words. Yi Hongyu did not want to bother with this shameless guy. What she wanted to say had nothing to do with Chen Pipi. She said with a cold gaze, The academy actually takes in the remnants of the devil's doctrine. Ning Kei had already thought about how she would react when she saw Tang Xiaotang, a girl from the devil's doctrine. He smiled and asked, What do you think? This rhetorical question was a little arrogant. Ning Kei was not qualified to be arrogant in front of the Tao addict. But in the past 6 months, he knew the history of youngest uncle joining the devil and personally experienced the ignorance of his teacher and senior brothers. He roughly understood the attitude of the academy, and the academy definitely had the right to be arrogant. Yi Hongyu said coldly, Since this matter involves the academy, it doesn't matter whether I have an opinion or not. But have you ever thought about what will happen if this matter gets out? Ning Kei said, So what? Ning Kei said, So what? Would the West Hill Divine Palace dare to send people into the back of the mountain to search for people? There are countless devout Haotian believers in the world. They don't need evidence. All they need is a word from the temple. Yi Hongyu said, the headmaster of the academy might not care about the West Hill Divine Palace, but it is hard for him to deal with the discussions and anger of countless devout believers. He can't kill everyone in the world. If the Divine Hall wants the world to believe that the academy takes in the remnants of the devil's doctrine, the war you told me yesterday will come early. That is not what the Divine Hall wants. Ning Ke looked at her beautiful eyes and suddenly understood something. He said, since the master and senior brother asked Chin Pippi to bring Tang Xiaotang here, they don't want to hide it from you. They want you to know about it and pretend you don't know anything. Knowing is knowing. It doesn't mean you can pretend you don't know. Since you are loyal to Haotian Taoism, you should know that pretending you don't know is the best choice for both Haotian Taoism and the academy. Yi Hongyu looked down at the bluestone cracks and the green mud in the cracks. She thought for a long time and said, you are right. Then she raised her head, looked at Ning Ke quietly and said, then what about her and Fatty Chin? Ning Ke looked at the girl from the devil's doctrine in the boat in the middle of the lake and the fatty who was running along the lake, shouting and joking. His heart softened and he said, please pretend you don't know about it. Yi Hongyu stood beside him and watched this interesting scene. There was not a trace of a smile in her eyes. Her expression was very serious and seemed to be getting colder and colder. If you know about Fatty Chen's background, you should know that many people will die if Haotian Taoism knows about it. Chin Pippi and Tang Xiaotang returned to the academy in the evening and did not meet Yi Hongyu again. There was no big fight between the new powerhouses by the Yanming Lake. After dinner, Yi Hongyu thanked Sang Sang politely and sincerely expressed her compliments. Then, she returned to her room with the dried green Taoist robe. It seems that she didn't have a good time in the West Hill Divine Palace. Ning Ke looked at her back disappearing in the corridor and said. Sang Sang put away the bowls and asked casually, how did you know? Ning Ke looked at the messy bowls and plates on the table and said, I can't believe she ate such disgusting dishes so happily and thanked you repeatedly. Sang Sang said uneasily, I told her that I should be the one to cook. Now she thinks that I made these dishes. She must think that I am a bad cook. Ning Ke said, you are my handmaiden, so you can only serve me. Why should you serve those outsiders? Besides, you are the successor of the divine priest of light and have a higher status than her in the West Hill Divine Palace. She should be the one to serve you. Sang Sang did not say anything. She made him a pot of tea and went to wash the dishes. Ning Ke sat beside the flower rack by the window, holding a teapot and looking at the sky where the red clouds were turning black. His brows gradually furrowed. He was thinking about something. Why did the people in the back of the mountain of the academy let Yi Hongyu know about Tang Xiaotang? Could it really be an extremely arrogant declaration? Or did they inform the West Hill in advance to show respect? Ning Ke thought about it and the tea in his hand was getting cold. He still could not figure it out. In the end, he suddenly understood one thing. The people in the back of the mountain, whether it was the teacher, eldest brother or second brother, were basically otherworldly people. They did not have the potential to become great conspirators. The reason why Chin Pippi brought Tang Xiaotang to the lake was probably because they wanted to tell Chin Pippi's family through Tang Xiaotang. For the next few days, the Yanming Lake was quiet. It rained twice and the heat was cut by a bit. Yi Hongyu locked herself in the guest room all day. She was not seen except when she was eating. No one knew what she was doing in the dark room. When she sat at the table and picked up the rice bowl, she became more and more silent. Ning Ke noticed that her eyes became more and more haggard and her face became paler and paler. He could not help but be vigilant. Zheng Jing and his wife, the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Library, came to visit. After visiting the house by the lake, they were very satisfied with Ning Ke's generosity. They were even happier when they found that there was not even a maidservant in the house. They thought that their daughter would live a happy life since she was so favored. Before leaving, Mrs. Zheng hugged Sang Sang and praised Ning Quebec. She told her to come back to the Grand Secretary's mansion more often. The next day, she sent over a dozen stewards and maidservants. Looking at the ordinary and dull maidservants in the courtyard, Ning Ke could guess what the Grand Secretary's wife was thinking. He could not help but feel a little amused. He thought that if Yi Hongyu did not attend the banquet and Mrs. Zheng saw such a beautiful girl living here, the situation would not be like this. The house by the lake was very large. Even if there were more than a dozen stewards and maidservants, it was not crowded at all. It could not even feel that there were so many people. Sang Sang was not used to being served, so most of the stewards and maidservants stayed in the remote areas of the house. The flower hall and the study were still quiet. The days passed slowly. The summer was getting hotter, the lake wind was getting hotter, and the cicadas were getting noisier. In the house by the Yanming Lake, there were still 3 people eating and 2 people living. Yi Hongyu was still like a ghost, staying in the quiet guest room all day. One day when Ning Ke came back from the academy, he took a cold shower and asked Sang Sang, who was wiping his body. He found out that Yi Hongyu did not even have dinner that day, and his expression gradually changed. Ning Ke had always admired and even feared this girl, the Tao addict. In his opinion, when the whole world was destroyed, probably only people like him and the Tao addict could survive. Moreover, he did not think that there was any friendship between him and the Tao addict, so he did not care about her life at all. But he couldn't just watch her shut herself off like this and become an idiot. Because that would be a pity. The cicadas were chirping, one louder than the other. The guest room by the Yanming Lake was next to the pier, and one could faintly hear the sound of the lake water beating on the shore not far away. Ning Ke walked along the stone path into the quiet yard and gently knocked on the door. There were some sounds in the room, as if someone was tidying up. When the door opened, he saw a face that was still beautiful but exceptionally pale. The sky was full of stars shining into the courtyard, and the girl looked more and more haggard. Ning Ke was shocked and asked, "Are you sick?" "You are sick." Yi Hongyu looked at him expressionlessly and said, "Why are you looking for me?" "I am busy." Ning Ke ignored her and walked directly into the room. He looked around and did not find any trace of her cultivating any secret skills of the devil's doctrine, such as the practice of Tao Tai. Then he noticed that the bed was still as clean as new, as if no one had slept in it these days. He could not help but be surprised. "You haven't slept these days?" Meditation is enough to replenish energy, and sleep will waste more time. Meditation is meditation, and sleep is sleep. There is no one in this world who knows this better than me. What do you want to do? What are you in a hurry to do? Yi Hongyu's voice was a little weak, and she said, "I have said that I need some time to leave the West Hill and come to Chang'an City. Time is very important to me now." Ning Ke turned to look into her eyes and said seriously, "Although I don't care about your life, and I know that there must be some bigwigs in the West Hill Divine Palace who want you to die, you are after all the Tao addict. If I let you die in my house, there will definitely be big trouble. I don't want to cause trouble. And, please continue to cast your precious recommendation votes. Thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to cast your recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 449. It was a hot summer night. The starlight was like snow, but it was impossible for it to be cool. Yi Hongyu's face was as pale as snow, and her voice was as cold as ice. However, it made people feel as if she was not in the guest house by the lake, but in a snowy winter. "I won't die, so you won't be in trouble. I just need time to cultivate." Ning Ke thought it was true, but he did not know what amazing cultivation secret she had taken from the Divine Hall. He said softly, "Cultivating alone is cultivation, and so is cultivating with each other. If you encounter any bottleneck, you may want to discuss it with me. Maybe it will help you." Yi Hongyu said coldly, will you be so kind? Ning Ke said calmly, cultivating with us can be a win-win situation. Yi Hongyu said calmly, you said that even Chen Pippi did not dare to humiliate me with such obscene words. I did not expect you to be such a boring person. Ning Ke was startled and said, how was my previous words obscene? Yi Hongyu looked into his eyes quietly and did not find a trace of shame or embarrassment. She thought that the cultivating with them was a secret in the Divine Hall's teachings. Did this guy really not know? However, she had seen too many shameless and cold-blooded acts of Ning Ke in the Tianqi Mountains in the wilderness. She would not believe it. She said, you are a student of the headmaster of the academy. Why do you want to steal from me? I said I don't want to steal anything from you. I just want to study with you. Ning Ke paused and said with a smile, all right, I do want to learn something from you. Although the academy has everything, there are no classics about divine skills. You know divine skills. He stared into her eyes and said, I saw your golden light by the Daming Lake. Yi Hongyu said, divine skills are a secret of Haotian Taoism. Ning Ke said, Sang Sang is the successor of the divine priest of light. She is qualified to learn divine skills. However, the great divine priest of light died too early, so she did not understand many things. Yi Hongyu frowned slightly. Ning Ke said, what are you worried about? Are you afraid that your disciple will starve to death? Are you afraid that Sang Sang will become the most powerful young man in West Hill? Yi Hongyu said, are you trying to provoke me? Ning Ke said, yes. Yi Hongyu said, since I know it is a provocation, why would I agree? Ning Ke smiled and said, because you are the most powerful Tao addict. Are you worried that Sang Sang will surpass you? Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, I never worry about something that will never happen. Ning Ke asked, then why didn't you agree? Yi Hongyu thought for a long time and asked, what will you give me in exchange? Ning Ke answered seriously, rent. Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly and said, I still underestimated you. Ning Ke asked, how shameless. Yi Hongyu nodded. Ning Ke turned around and walked out of the room. Yi Hongyu looked at his back and suddenly said, you can't listen. She can't tell you. Ning Ke stopped, looked back at her and said seriously, I swear by the headmaster's character. Ning Ke felt it was a pity that he could not find out Yi Hongyu's secret and gain some benefits from it. But he believed that as long as the Tao addict continued to live in Chang'an, he would find a chance. Lying on the big bed, he held Sang Sang's snow-white and ice-cold feet just like he had done in the past 10 summers, enjoying the cool summer that only he could enjoy. I don't understand why she agreed, but this is a good opportunity. Among all the people I have met in the West Hill Divine Palace, only this woman can make me admire her. It doesn't matter how much you cultivate the divine skill. I believe that you can get rid of the cold disease in your body faster. Sang Sang felt her feet itch, so she rubbed them and gently hummed. Ning Ke looked at the silver starlight outside the window and listened to the sound of cicadas. He suddenly felt the feet in his arms warm up, but his mind was calm and peaceful. He thought that he had traveled with the calligraphy addict and now lived with the Tao addict. Long Qing might be dead, and the flower addict might come for revenge. Maybe he could turn the enemy into a friend, and then he would have a relationship with the 3 addicts in the world. It would be a good story. While he was feeling proud, the silver starlight outside the window suddenly turned into the heavy snow in front of the red wall in Chang'an in winter. He thought of the woman with black hair like a waterfall and picturesque eyes in the snow, and he could not help feeling lost. Sang Sang had always been able to sense his subtle emotions since she was a child. After a moment of silence, she sensed that Ning Ke's mood was a little strange. She asked curiously, what are you thinking about? Ning Ke pinched her little feet and said, nothing. He thought that it was a little helpless for a life that was difficult to even fantasize about. No matter what the reason was, Yi Hongyu agreed to cultivate divine skills with Sang Sang. Although Song Song's talent and potential and divine skills had long been recognized by the great divine priest of light and the great divine priest of revelation, she had spent the first 15 years of her life cooking, washing vegetables, and cleaning tables. Her theoretical understanding of Haotian Taoism's divine skills was very different from that of the Tao addict. Sang Sang nervously walked into the secluded residence. Then the room, which had been quiet for a long time, gradually became bright, and a solemn atmosphere spread with the wind. Fortunately, it was a midsummer day, so it was not too conspicuous. That night, Ning Ke and Sang Sang had a serious discussion in bed for a long time. After confirming that he really did not have the talent to cultivate Haotian Taoism's divine skills, he decided to respect the headmaster's character. From then on, he did not ask Sang Sang or try to peep. When Sang Sang walked into the residence again, he stood in the courtyard where several plum blossoms were planted, waiting quietly. The plum blossoms naturally would not bloom in summer. The old twigs had a special kind of beauty, just like his mood at this time. Although he did not gain anything from this matter, it was also good if Sang Sang could gain something. That night, Yi Hongyu was eating a bowl of white rice. Suddenly, she looked up at Ning Ke and said, "Do you know how talented your little handmaiden is in cultivation?" Ning Ke shook his head and then nodded. He said, "I know it is very talented, but I don't know exactly how talented." Yi Hongyu said calmly, "Very talented. So talented that if I were you, I would be so ashamed that I would hit a pillar when I thought that my handmaiden's cultivation talent was so much higher than mine." Ning Ke laughed happily and said, "When I take a bath, no one sees me naked. I am still chaste. Why would I play the game of hitting a pillar like those women in the yamen?" Yi Hongyu looked at him and suddenly said, "When this matter is over, I will definitely kill you, even if it causes a war between the West Hill and the Tang Empire." Ning Ke gasped and said with emotion, "So I am so important now?" Studying the divine skill with Sang Sang did not bring much change to Yi Hongyu's life. She still stayed in the guest room for a long time. She was still focused and even a little crazy in her cultivation. Under the sunlight, she stared at the sword torn from the paper in a daze. Occasionally, she would walk out of the guest room and murmur to the sky in the courtyard. She stroked the bent old plum and seemed to be lost in thought. Her face became paler and her eyes became brighter. She looked more haggard, but she was still focused and determined. Ning Ke, who was watching from the side, finally understood why she was called the Tao addict. Only the words, "addicted to cultivation," could describe this young Taoist priest. Naturally, Ning Ke thought of the people in the back of the mountain of the academy and the saying, "Life is like a question." He thought of himself climbing the old library, entering the back of the mountain, understanding talisman Taoism, and even earlier meditating on calligraphy Taoism. He thought that they were all the same and could not help but feel sad. He suddenly walked to Yi Hongyu, who was beside the plum tree. Although cultivation does need to be crazy, it is not right to blindly cultivate. I have some experience. If you relax a little, you can see the sky beyond the pot. Yi Hongyu turned around and looked at him calmly. She said, "Where do you get your pride and confidence to judge that I have not passed the test you mentioned in the past 10 years of cultivation?" Ning Ke said, "But you can at least try again now." Yi Hongyu said sarcastically, "How? Take me to the old Taoist temple to worship? Or take me to enjoy the scenery in Chang, unlike how you took Imo Shanshan? Or do you want to cultivate together?" Ning Ke was slightly embarrassed. It was not because of the word dual cultivation, but because she mentioned the calligraphy addict. After he calmed down, he looked at her and said seriously, "Let's fight." Yi Hongyu's eyes brightened when she heard this suggestion. For a Tao addict like her, this suggestion was in line with her temperament. She smiled and said, "Do you dare to fight with me?" Ning Ke said honestly, "Your state of cultivation has dropped a lot, and you have been mentally exhausted these days. If I want to defeat you, this seems to be a good chance." Yi Hongyu said after a moment of silence, "The line between life and death is the line in my mind." Ning Ke said, "Same here." Yi Hongyu said, do you really believe that I am weak? Ning Ke looked at her eyes quietly and said, maybe your lower state of see-through is just an illusion. But if I don't sweep a house, how can I sweep the world? I don't even dare to challenge you. Speaking of this, he smiled and closed his mouth. He said in his heart, if I don't even dare to challenge you, who is injured and has dropped a state, how can I challenge that powerful enemy? The talisman paper flew in the quiet courtyard. The great spirit attached to it silently turned into the majestic chi of heaven and earth, stirring up a gust of wind in the courtyard. A green belt danced in the wind, like a refined sword, or a fish swimming freely in a transparent lake. The willow tree behind the white wall of the guest house shook, and the shadow gathered and scattered. The ripples on Yenming Lake were dense, like Chen Pippi's face when facing the wind. The wind stopped. The plum tree in the courtyard had long been broken into thousands of broken branches, crushed into a straight line by the two powerful auras. It was on the green slate in the courtyard, neither west nor east. Ning Ke was on this side of the plumb line, and Yi Hongyu was on the other side. There is one more chapter. Please vote for it. Thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 450. A plum blossom line divided the summer courtyard and the autumn scenery equally. Yi Hongyu stood quietly. Her face grew paler, but her eyes were sparkling. Her black Taoist bun was shaken loose and fell on her shoulders. Ning Ke raised his arm and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The two did not fight to the death, or even win. But Ning Ke's face was full of smiles. Even the long blood stain on the corner of his mouth seemed to be laughing, because he was very satisfied with the result of the battle. He did not use the Haotian divine light imitated by the Great Spirit, nor did he draw his knife. He only used the talisman technique to make Yi Hongyu use her natal Taoist fish. This was enough to make him proud. More importantly, from the moment he saw the Tao addict on the snow cliff in the wilderness, this cultivation genius of Haotian Taoism had been the deepest shadow in his heart and the goal he wanted to pursue the most. He had always thought that he was still far away from the Tao addict, but today he was able to tie with her. From the young soldier in the city of Wei who could only meditate and daydream without cultivation to the Academy's entry into the human realm who could compete with the legendary Tao addict, Ning Ke's journey seemed to be smooth sailing. But only he knew how much sweat and blood he had to put in to achieve this. At this moment, he did not need to think about the fact that the Tao addict was injured and her state dropped. He felt that he should be proud. However, Yi Hongyu did not want him to be proud. She looked at the ground and said expressionlessly, "You have indeed made rapid progress, even faster than the intelligence of the judicial department. It is also beyond my imagination. But this is nothing to be proud of, because you can't even force me to use my full strength." Ning Ke was not affected by her words at all. He waved his fists excitedly, completely ignoring the blood and sweetness in his chest. He said in a hoarse voice, "You are not suitable to learn from Chen Pippi. What's the point of bickering?" Yi Hongyu slowly raised her head and looked at him. Her beautiful black hair slid down from her right shoulder and naturally hung in a perfectly straight bun, like a smooth waterfall. It looked soft, but it actually contained a lot of power. Her expression was calm, her eyebrows were straight and firm, and her eyes were piercingly cold. Ning Ke's expression suddenly froze, and he slowly activated his psyche power. The crystal clear dew of the Great Spirit in his body began to rotate, transferring power to every part of his body. Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly and said, "Do you want to take another blow from me?" Ning Ke took a deep breath and said, "Please." Yi Hongyu untied the collar of her green Taoist robe, revealing her fair skin. Ning Ke was slightly startled. When he first saw Yi Hongyu in the Tianqi Mountains, she was a beautiful and seductive girl in a red skirt. At that time, she had never been stingy with her beauty. However, he believed that she would never use her beauty as a weapon. Then why was she unbuttoning the collar of her Taoist robe? What Yi Hongyu did next shocked Ning Ke and made him speechless. She stretched her hand downwards from the neckline. As her hand entered, the thin green Taoist robe became even tighter, revealing the curves of the young girl's chest. It was so beautiful that it made one's heart beat faster. She took out a small piece of paper from her undergarments. The small piece of paper was very small, about the thickness of 2 fingers. Ink lines could be seen on the edges, but the ink lines were blurred by the rain or the young girl's sweat. Ning Ke looked at the thin piece of paper between her fingers, as if he could smell the slight warmth from it. "This is a sword?" Yi Hongyu said calmly, "This is the strongest sword I have ever cultivated in my life." Ning Ke's expression gradually turned serious, and he said, "I want to see." Yi Hongyu held the small piece of paper between her fingers and pushed it forward. She was standing at the other end of the plumb line, several feet away from Ning Quebec. However, it was as if the piece of paper between her fingers was really in front of Ning Ke's eyes when she stretched out her hand. Ning Ke understood that Yi Hongyu's action of pushing the piece of paper forward was an extremely cold action of drawing a sword. Then he clearly saw the ink lines on the edges of the paper. Then he saw an extremely sharp and extremely powerful sword. The sword did not have any real external shape. There was only an endless, terrifying sword style that was like a great river coming from the sky. The sword style proudly laid across the courtyard and stopped on the plumb line, quietly in Yi Hongyu's hand. It spewed towards Ning Ke's eyebrows, using an invisible intent to form a visible wound. Ning Ke felt a great sense of danger, and the great spirit in his body suddenly circulated violently. However, the sword was too fast, and the sword style was too sudden. The sword style completely ignored time and enveloped his entire body in an instant. Before he could react, the sword had already struck him. The sword momentum formed by the sword essence of the paper sword did not have any actual sharp blade. Like a turbid wave, it directly smashed over. The enormous power contained in the sword momentum directly knocked him off the ground. Like a fallen bird, he flew backwards and finally crashed heavily into the wall of the courtyard, making a muffled sound. The newly painted wall dust fell off, revealing the black bricks inside. Ning Ke sat under the wall and spat out a mouthful of blood. The dust from the wall was all over his face, and when he was washed by the blood, there were many ravines on his clothes. It was a tragic sight. He raised his hand with difficulty to wipe the blood off his chest, and looked at the thin piece of paper that Yi Hongyu was holding in between her slender fingers. His eyes were filled with horror. "What is this sword?" Yi Hongyu did not tell him. Ning Ke naturally did not know that the piece of paper between her fingers was the world's strongest powerhouse, the sage of sword, Liu Bai. He had condensed half of his life's sword Taoism into a clumsy sword style. It was universally acknowledged that the Tao addict's talent in cultivation was peerless. However, she had pondered for so many days and still could not completely understand this thin paper sword. However, even if she could only understand a little of it, she could still blind Shinbachi, who was at the upper state of see-through, with a casual wave of her slender fingers. How could Ning Ke resist it? Yi Hongyu walked past the line formed by the plumb line and nodded slightly to Ning Ke, who was in the corner. She said, "Thank you." After saying this, she turned around and returned to the guest room. Ning Ke supported himself against the wall and stood up with difficulty. He looked at the closed door thoughtfully. At this time, he could already confirm that Yi Hongyu's secret was that small paper sword. The reason why she said thank you to him was probably because she had finally made some progress in her cultivation after today's battle. However, he did not understand. Although Yi Hongyu's state had indeed fallen to the lower see-through state, she hid the small paper sword in her undergarments. Her real power was probably at the threshold of the knowing destiny state or even further. If so, why would someone in the West Hill Divine Palace, who believed in power, want to deal with her? Did she hide her power? Why did she hide her strength and was so anxious to obtain more power? Why was she hiding her strength and so anxious? Who in the divine hall was worthy of her spending so much effort to deal with? Thinking of a faint possibility, Ning Ke had long forgotten the pain in his body. Looking at the closed door, he was shocked beyond words. He thought that the Tao addict was indeed the Tao addict. Not only was her cultivation state higher than his, but even what she wanted to do was more vigorous than what he wanted to do. After the parting battle, Ning Ke and Yi Hongyu studied or fought together many times. These two young people who were best at fighting in the cultivation world fought in the courtyard, in the lotus field, under the shade of willow trees, and among the cliffs. The more they fought, the more they felt like they were fighting with another version of themselves in the world. They were intoxicated and crazy with the battle. However, Yi Hongyu did not use the thin paper sword in the following battles, and Ning Ke did not win any of her battles. Fortunately, the so-called life and death battle was just an excuse to put pressure on himself before the battle. Otherwise, he would have died even if he had 9 lives. Without the paper sword, Ning Ke still could not win against the Tao addict. He had lost so many battles. If it were an ordinary person, he would probably be frustrated to the point of numbness and give up. However, he did not feel this way at all. He cherished the opportunity to fight with the Tao addict and kept learning from it. Ning Ke wanted to see the small paper sword again, but he admired Yi Hongyu's changes in Taoism law in the battle. It was a powerful thing to know everything. What was even more powerful was Yi Hongyu's speed and decisiveness in choosing which Taoism law to fight with. It was as if she had already guessed what he was going to do before he attacked. Other than the primordial 13 arrows, Ning Ke had used all his means in the battle these days. He had even used the Haotian divine light that was imitated by the Great Spirit, but he still lost badly. At this moment, he recalled the battle by the Daming Lake last year. Yi Hongyu had used the ice fish formed by the lake water to dissolve the primordial 13 arrows. Ning Ke was sure that it had nothing to do with calculation, but her instinctive reaction. He could not help but feel that it was even more terrifying. This kind of instinctive reaction could completely pull apart an enemy of the same state in battle. One morning, Ning Ke, who had lost another battle, looked at Yi Hongyu under the shade of willow trees. He finally could not control the confusion in his heart and asked, "How did you do it?" In these days of battle, Yi Hongyu had also learned a lot. Her body had become much healthier, and she had made progress in understanding the paper sword. Moreover, she had once again confirmed the fact that Ning Ke was not the opponent with the highest state she had ever met, but he was the most difficult opponent she had ever met. This man was not like ordinary cultivators who could only use flying swords and talismans to attack foolishly. He could really fight. Because she had confirmed this fact, she also confirmed that among the disciples of the second floor of the academy, Ning Ke should be ranked in the top 3 on the kill list, only after Mr. First and Mr. Second. But that was all in the future. She did not mind Ning Ke becoming stronger now because she had enough confidence. Therefore, she decided to teach Ning Ke some things. Do you know what knowing destiny state is? The shade of the willow covered the girl's slightly rosy and beautiful face. It was cool, and even her emotionless question became cool and pleasant. I'm sleepy. I don't have anything today. I'm thinking if I should open a ticket and ask for votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 451. 2 years ago, on the journey from the city of Wei to Chang'an, Liu Qingchen once told Ning Ke what the knowing destiny state was. Later, when he entered the academy and left the old library at night, he also asked Chen Pippi to show him the knowing destiny state. At that time, the sky was covered with stars, and the fish in the wetland lake were suspended in it, like still objects in amber, or kites in the transparent sky, which was very magical. Unlike the see-through state, where you only understand the rules of the qi of heaven and earth on the surface, you have mastered the rules of the qi of heaven and earth in essence. You can understand the origin of the world and clearly capture the connection between Haotian and all things in nature. Only then can you know the destiny and truly achieve Tao. Yi Hongyu said, entering the knowing destiny state means you have entered the ranks of grand cultivators. If you can even know the destiny, you can naturally perceive the slightest changes in the qi of heaven and earth. Then in a battle, no matter what the enemy does, they can't surpass their experience and perception. This is the real horror of the knowing destiny state. Ning Ke looked at the reflection of the willow branches in the lake and thought for a long time. Then he asked, but you are now only in the lower see-through state. Why do I still have such a hard time fighting with you? I have crossed that threshold and entered the knowing destiny state. Yi Hongyu said, once I have seen it, I can't forget it. So even if my state keeps falling, my consciousness is still in the knowing destiny state. Naturally, you are no match for me. The willow branches on the lake bank swayed with the wind. The drooping branches and leaves touched the surface of the lake from time to time, causing ripples. They were like dragonflies skimming the water, breaking the reflection on the water into pieces. Ning Ke looked at the swaying lake and the willow shadows and asked in a low voice, so, if I want to defeat a grand cultivator in the knowing destiny state, I have to cross that threshold first. The 5 states of cultivation are very strict. It is basically very difficult to challenge someone in a higher state without any special circumstances. But from the perceiving state to the no-doubt state, and from the no-doubt state to the see-through state, with the right time, place, and people, with some help, there are occasionally successful challenges. Yi Hongyu said, for example, last year on the snow cliff in the wilderness, you shot Long Qing with 1 arrow. Also, before I entered the see-through state, I defeated an instructor of the Revelation Institute who was in the middle state of the see-through state. But the knowing destiny state is the real peak of cultivation. It is beyond the mortal world, and there is an insurmountable gap between it and the other 4 states. If a cultivator in the see-through state wants to challenge a grand cultivator in the knowing destiny state, it is like a manta stretching out its forelimbs to stop a carriage on the road. He is destined to be crushed to death. Ning Ke looked at the water reptiles that were chasing Luing on the surface of the lake and asked calmly, I just want to know if there are any successful cases. Just one is enough. If you want to see the battle between me and Chen Pipi as a real example, then I can tell you that I can defeat him at any time. But you should know that this is a special case. Other than that, in the West Hill Classics, there has never been a case of a see-through state cultivator successfully challenging a knowing destiny state cultivator. Ning Ke's face looked a little disappointed. Yi Hongyu looked at his expression and said hesitantly, but other than the records in the classics, I heard from the elders in the Divine Hall that Mr. Ku once left the academy halfway before his cultivation was completed. It was on that journey that he defeated a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state when he was still in the see-through state. Ning Ke's eyes suddenly lit up as he listened to this past that had no real evidence. He was very clear that there was an infinite gap between him and youngest uncle, no matter in cultivation talent or any other aspect. But at least this had happened before, so no matter how small the concept of succeeding in a cross-state challenge was, it would not be as cold and despairing as he had thought before. He turned to look at the girl under the shade of the willow and asked, the powerhouses in the peak state of martial arts and the powerhouses in the devil's doctrine. How should their states be calculated? The concept of the peak state of martial arts originated from the devil's doctrine. Yi Hongyu said, this state is similar to the knowing destiny state, but they take 2 completely different paths. The knowing destiny state refers to the understanding and mastery of heaven and earth. The powerhouses in the devil's doctrine pursue extreme power and create another world within themselves. They do not communicate with the outside world at all and try to replace Haotian. Although this cultivation concept is extremely evil and arrogant, I have to admit that it is extremely powerful. Ning Ke looked at the girl's gradually stern eyes and suddenly asked, the Taoist sect and the devil's doctrine are incompatible. All the disciples of Haotian Taoism that I have seen, whether it is you or Chen Pipi, hate the devil's doctrine to the extreme. Now that Chen Pipi has started dating a girl from the devil's doctrine, I still don't understand. The Divine Hall should know very well that Xia Ho is a remnant of the devil's doctrine. Why do they allow him to live so well? Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly as if she understood why he would ask such a question. She also understood the undisguised coldness and sarcasm in his tone. The West Hill Divine Palace protects the world on behalf of Haotian. They need power, especially when the Tang Empire still exists. The Divine Hall needs power even more, and Xia Ho is one of the most powerful powers in the world in the past decades. Yi Hongyu said calmly, Xia Ho is a broadsword that can split mountains and seas. Both the Divine Hall and the Tang Empire want to hold this broadsword in their hands. The two have fought for decades to form this complicated situation. Xia Ho is a very useful broadsword for the Divine Hall. He is a broadsword of the highest level in the Tang Empire and even the military. How could they bear to let him go? The blazing sun shone on Chang'an City. The wind blew from the Yanming Mountain on the south bank, bringing with it a sense of dryness. Even with the ripples of the lake and the shade of the willow trees cooling down, it still made people feel a little stuffy. It was quiet on the lake bank and willow trees. After an unknown period of time, Ning Ke looked at Yi Hongyu and said seriously, I need power now. Yi Hongyu was silent. Ning Ke looked into her eyes and continued, what you need now is time, and in fact, power. Yi Hongyu said, I don't deny that. Ning Ke said, can you help me? Yi Hongyu looked at him and said, what are you going to give me in exchange? It can't be rent this time. Ning Ke asked, what do you want? Yi Hongyu said, Haran's sword. One was the great Tao addict of the West Hill Divine Palace, and the other was the new student of the headmaster of the academy in Chang'an City. Yi Hongyu and Ning Ke were destined to never be true friends, no matter their standpoint or their past. Even if they cultivated together and learned from each other, they would only think about what would happen if they became enemies. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for the two of them to think about what real benefits they could gain from each other. However, when Ning Ke asked, Yi Hongyu's answer was so quick and concise, as if she had been thinking about it for countless days and nights. Interestingly, Ning Ke seemed to have been mentally prepared for this scene for a long time. When he heard Yi Hongyu's request, he was not surprised at all. He asked, what are you offering? Yi Hongyu said, you saw my bargaining chip the other day. Ning Ke frowned and thought for a long time. He said, do you have complete autonomy over your bargaining chip? Yi Hongyu said, since he gave it to me, it is mine. Ning Ke looked at her and said, unfortunately, my bargaining chip belongs to the academy. I don't have complete autonomy. I need to go back to the academy and ask the headmaster for his opinion. Yi Hongyu said, go ahead. I don't think I need to remind you that this matter needs to be kept secret. Ning Ke nodded and left Yanming Lake. The grass hut at the back of the mountain of the academy was facing the wind. Fortunately, the mountain was lush with plants and was covered by the Cloud Gate tactical array. The primordial chi was abundant, and the wind in the hut was not as hot as the wind by Yanming Lake. The headmaster sat on the futon with a book in his left hand and a pen in his right hand. He was copying something. Ning Ke sat cross-legged on the futon by the desk. Ever since he arrived at the back of the mountain of the academy and entered the grass hut, he had been sitting on the futon for a long time under the headmaster's orders. The history book on the desk had been moved forward for 2 years. He had tried to speak during this period, but the headmaster did not respond at all. He was still focused on copying the book, as if his young disciple's words were just the wind blowing in from outside the hut. The headmaster casually threw the yellowish and old book in his left hand onto the desk. He put the pen on the inkstone, rubbed his wrist and stretched. Ning Ke stood up as fast as he could. He took out a towel from the basin and wrung it dry. He handed it to the headmaster and poured away the remaining tea on the desk, replacing it with a hot one. You can't rush things. The headmaster threw away the towel and picked up the slightly hot teacup. He gently blew the foam on the surface and said, just like tea, how can you drink it if it's too hot? Ning Ke was only thinking about how to get the thin paper sword on Yi Hongyu's chest and did not listen to his teacher's words. He rubbed his hands nervously and said, "But this hot tea is going to get cold if we don't drink it now." The headmaster turned to look at him and said with a smile, "If that's the case, you can drink that cup of tea yourself. Why bother asking me? In the whole back of the mountain, you have always been the one with the most ideas." Ning Ke had no choice but to listen to the instruction and warning hidden in his words. His body suddenly stiffened and he said with a bitter face, "I don't have the money for the tea. The money belongs to the academy and my teacher. The most important thing is that even though I have ideas, I really don't dare to have any ideas on such a big matter." "What is an idea?" The headmaster said, "An idea is what you think when you are faced with a choice. Which direction do you choose at the fork? To change or not to change, which choice do you want to make?" Ning Ke was very honest, or rather dishonest, and asked, "How should I choose?" The headmaster almost choked on his words. He angrily scolded, "How do you want to bother me with such a simple matter? You idiot! Of course, you have to choose the one that is beneficial to you. What do you want the most if you can do it all over again? Help your father manage the factory and successfully build yourself into a rich second generation? Flirting with a girl that you once passed by, holding hands and kissing on the forehead? Perhaps you should let those regrets of the past no longer become regrets. P.S. There are more today. I will continue to write. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 452. The mountain wind blew into the hut, causing the gauze curtains to sway. Mist rose from the teacup in the headmaster's hand and dissipated instantly. The hot tea in the cup would probably cool down faster. Ning Ke was not chin-pippy, and his face was not wrinkled by the wind. However, after being reprimanded by the headmaster, he could not help but look a little worried. He said, "I just want you to see if there are more advantages or disadvantages." The headmaster took a sip of tea and put down the teacup. He shook his head and said, "I'm already so old. I don't have the energy to think about these small things. Do you think it's worth it?" Ning Ke said seriously, "Ever since she made this request, I have been thinking about it. The Haoran sword is indeed the most famous sword Taoism skill in our academy. However, without youngest uncle's great spirit, it is actually not a cultivation method that can't be taught to outsiders." The headmaster did not comment and said, "Continue." Ning Ke recalled the scene of him fighting with Yi Hongyu in the courtyard. He thought of the paper sword she was holding between her fingers and said hesitantly, "Although I don't understand the paper sword she was holding, it is indeed interesting. I even suspect that it might be the South Gene." The headmaster frowned and looked at him. He said unhappily, "Make it simple." Ning Ke said honestly, "I think it's worth it." The headmaster said casually, "In that case, what are you hesitating for? Let's change." The academy's unique skill, the Haoran sword, was given away just like that. The headmaster's expression was so indifferent, as if he had given away a withered cabbage. Ning Ke could not adapt to the atmosphere. After a moment of hesitation, he looked at the headmaster and asked, "Teacher, don't you have anything to ask me?" The headmaster took the scroll and was ready to continue what he was doing. He said casually, "What is there to ask?" Ning Ke asked with a hopeful expression, "What if I die?" The headmaster didn't even look up. He looked at the scroll in his hand and waited for the ink to melt. He said, "Everyone will die. If you die, I won't need you to remind me." Ning Ke's heart, which had been soaked in corpse water and was invulnerable to all kinds of poison, finally split into two pieces after hearing his teacher's irresponsible and even cold words. One piece was left for Sang Sang, and the other turned into a fire that burned the headmaster's beard in his imagination. Ning Ke first went to second brother's courtyard and made his request in the sound of the waterfall. Then he went to the cliff cave where tens of thousands of books were hidden. Finally, he passed through the cloud gate array and went to the second floor of the old library. He took out several books related to Haoran's sword from the bookshelf and walked to the east window to ask third sister to register. The whole process of retrieving the book was very smooth, so smooth that it was a little strange. The headmaster of the academy had given him a very irresponsible verbal order. Second brother, the scholar, and third sister had irresponsibly given him what he wanted without asking for anything. So when he sat in the carriage with the thick books, he was still in a daze. He thought that according to today's experience, he could steal those precious cultivation books from the academy anytime and anywhere. In this case, he would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of his life. Returning to the house by the Yanming Lake, Ning Ke went directly to the backyard and threw all the thick books in his arms on the desk. He said, "Here are the things you want." Yi Hongyu picked up a book from the table and frowned slightly. Even she did not expect that the academy would allow Ning Ke to take out such a precious cultivation book so casually. She even doubted the authenticity of these books. However, when she opened the cover page, she knew that they were real. Ning Ke found that the book in her hand was a preliminary exploration of Haoran's sword. It was the same book that he had read in the old library when he vomited blood. He could not help but feel a little emotional. After a moment, he got rid of this emotion and looked at Yi Hongyu, who was immersed in the book. He reminded her, "What about mine?" Yi Hongyu raised her hand and slowly untied the cloth button on the collar of her Taoist robe. Ning Ke stared at the movement of her fingers. At this moment, he did not know whether he was looking forward to the paper sword that seemed to contain countless mysteries or the white and graceful scenery under the Taoist robe. Yi Hongyu took out the thin paper sword that was hidden deep in her undergarments but did not hand it over. Instead, she stared at Ning Ke's eyes and said, "I have 2 requests." Ning Ke said, "Go ahead." Yi Hongyu said, "You can only read this paper sword for 1 night." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "Impossible, unless you also only read these books about cultivating Haoran's sword for 1 night." Yi Hongyu smiled slightly and was about to say something. Ning Ke suddenly thought that the young Taoist girl in front of him was a genius in the cultivation world. She might really have a terrifying photographic memory like Sang Sang. He quickly stopped her and said, "It is not appropriate to limit the time so strictly. I agree that you can read it for a few more nights. Then I will also read it for a few more nights." Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly and then laughed. She shook her head and said, "You reacted quickly." Ning Ke said, "I am not a person who is willing to be taken advantage of." Yi Hongyu said, 3 nights. Ning Ke thought for a moment and said, "Deal." Then he asked curiously, "What is the second condition?" Yi Hongyu looked at the paper sword between her fingers and said, "You are not allowed to smell it." This paper sword had been hidden in her chest for a long time. No one knew how much sweat and body odor it had stained it. If it was an ordinary girl, she would probably be extremely embarrassed. Although Yi Hongyu was not that embarrassed, she did not want Ning Ke to do those disgusting things. Ning Ke looked at her and said seriously, "Do I look like such a perverted person?" Yi Hongyu said with a smile, "Younger sister Sang Sang grew up with you. You made her your lover before she became an adult. This is a very perverted behavior." Cicadas and frogs croaked occasionally in the courtyard in the summer night. Ning Ke looked at the paper sword between his fingers quietly with the help of the light from the oil lamp. Sang Sang had accompanied him to stare at the small paper sword in a daze. At this time, she finally could not resist the drowsiness and went to sleep. Ning Ke felt the touch of the paper between his fingers and subconsciously rubbed it gently. This action looked a little obscene, but in fact, he did not have any obscene thoughts. He also did not think that this thin piece of paper had gently rubbed between the soft flesh of the Tao addict's chest. He just wanted to use this action to relieve the tension in his heart. This paper sword was very thin, and the paper was ordinary. It was only the size of 2 human fingers. The edge of the paper sword was covered with uneven thickness ink lines, and outside the ink lines were some rough edges of the paper. At the beginning, this should be a small sword drawn on the paper, and then it was torn by someone. From the ink lines on the edge of the paper sword, one could draw a conclusion that the person who drew the sword was not good at using a brush, and his state of painting was very low. However, that person's state of cultivation was very high, so high that the ink lines seemed to be the edge of a real sword. The yellowish light made the thin paper between his fingers darker and more yellow. Ning Ke stared at the paper sword, and his expression became more and more serious and nervous. At night, the lakeside courtyard was not as stuffy as it was during the day. However, sweat began to ooze from his face, and gradually became the size of a soybean, slowly dripping down from his cheeks. More and more sweat kept gushing out from his back, gradually wetting his thin shirt and pants, soaking through the cloth, and then flowed along the legs of the chair to the ground. At this moment, his body seemed to be a ball of cotton full of water, which was forced by the strong and majestic invisible sword style on the paper sword, and began to drip continuously. The reason for this was that his psyche power had broken through the sharp and invisible edge of the paper sword, which made the sense of perception extremely painful, and entered the inside of the paper sword, so that he could feel the truth of the sword style. In the battle in the villa a few days ago, when Yi Hongyu took out the small paper sword from her arms, he had felt the horrible sword style attached to the paper like a river coming from the sky. At this time, the little paper sword was lying quietly between his fingers, so he could feel this sword intent more delicately and more vividly. After meditating for half a night, he finally understood that this sword intent was not imitating the power of a great river hanging upside down from the clouds of the ninth heaven, but describing the great river itself. This fact proved one of Ning Ke's conjectures. He felt that the light paper sword between his fingers had suddenly become incomparably heavy. He felt the surging yellow waves, constantly washing his body and hitting his sense of perception, as if they could break through the embankment at the edge of the sense of perception and spread to the wilderness at any time. In the sword style, he felt like falling into the depths of a river, feeling the strong pressure everywhere. In the bedroom of Xia Yi, he was like a real drowning person, with a pale face, short of breath, and sweat pouring out of his body like a waterfall. In the early morning, Ning Ke woke up from the state of meditation. The round chair he was sitting on was full of water. The green brick floor beneath the armchair had also been soaked in a large patch. The paper sword between his fingers had also been soaked with sweat and had become somewhat transparent. However, the sword drawn on the paper was still as clear as ever. It was as if the ink lines had some kind of magical power that allowed it to be unaffected by the world. Sang Sang looked at him with a worried face. Ning Ke looked at her and squeezed out a smile with difficulty, saying, "I'm okay." He was shocked by his own voice, which was so hoarse and dry, as if he had been in the desert without water for more than 10 days. He immediately understood that this was the result of a serious lack of water. He said, "Boil a pot of porridge and bring me the sealwort hidden in the study. I need to nourish myself. That sealwort has been boiled into the porridge. I saw that you were sweating too much, so I added some salt." Sang Sang took a bowl of mixed porridge from the small table beside her, looked at him and said carefully, "Do you still have strength? Do you need me to feed you?" After replenishing some of his energy, Ning Ke returned to the yard and returned the paper sword to Yi Hongyu. After one night of watching the sword, he had confirmed many things. He knew that with his current state of cultivation, this was the most he could comprehend. It would be meaningless even if he watched it for another 2 nights. Yi Hongyu looked at his pale cheeks and said with emotion, "You clearly know where the limit of your ability is and can resist the temptation of this paper sword. You are not stupid and greedy. I have to admit that although your aptitude is average, your temperament is first class in the world." If it was any other day, Ning Ke would definitely show a proud expression after being praised by the Tao addict. However, he had something on his mind today. The sword in his sense of perception did not say much to her and left. He left Yanming Lake by horse carriage and went to the academy as fast as he could. He passed through the cloud gate array and entered the back of the mountain of the academy. He did not have time to say hello to his senior brothers and sisters at the Mirror Lake. He frowned and talked to himself all the way to the cliff cave on the mountainside. In the pavilion by the quiet lake, seventh sister put down the embroidery needle in her hand and looked at Ning Kei's back disappearing into the forest. She frowned and murmured, "Youngest brother, looks a little weird today, as if he is crazy." Sixth brother, who was repairing the water wheel by the stream and releasing fish for the big white goose wooden fish, straightened up and looked in that direction. He shook his head and said, "Why does youngest brother look like 11th brother today?" Ning Kei did not know what his senior brothers and sisters were talking about. He walked to the bottom of the cliff cave like a silly guy and walked to the scholar's table. The scholar was reading and did not even look up at him. Ning Kei stood beside the scholar and stopped talking to himself. He was silent for a long time. When those lines gradually overlapped and formed in his sense of perception, his eyes brightened. He walked directly to the back of the table and pushed the scholar away from the chair. He took a piece of paper and a brush pen and dipped it in ink. He began to immerse himself in writing. The scholar was the most strange existence in the back of the mountain of the academy. He was usually very good-tempered, but if someone disturbed his reading, his temper would become very bad. Even eldest brother or second brother did not dare to disturb him when he was absorbed in reading. Today, he was so violently pushed away by Ning Quebec. He was holding a roll of agricultural books with great interest. He suddenly became angry and rolled up his sleeves to beat Ning Quebec. However, when he saw what Ning Kei wrote on the paper, his fist that had been raised in the air slowly fell down. He curiously stood behind Ning Kei and looked at it more and more attentively. It did not take long for Ning Kei to finish what he wanted to do. He put the brush pen on the inkstone and raised the paper to the air to carefully look at it in the sunlight. He confirmed that although it was impossible for him to completely simulate the majestic sword style of the Great River, this was already the best he could do. He suddenly found that the scholar was behind him and staring at the paper in his hand in a daze. He hurriedly explained, "I know this sword painting is really a little ugly, but it's none of my business." "How, is this sword ugly?" The scholar clasped his hands behind his back and slightly bent his body. He looked at the crooked small sword on the paper and praised, "I haven't seen such a beautiful sword for many years." Ning Kei was greatly shocked. He thought that this guy who only knew how to read could also understand this sword. He subconsciously asked, "Sir, have you seen something similar before?" The scholar did not turn back. He pointed to the cliff cave behind him and said, "There are many classics of sword tactics and cultivation methods in there. Some authors like to illustrate and annotate, so I have seen some swords." Ning Kei thought that it was so. He curiously asked, "What do you think of this sword? If the sword you copied is nothing compared to the countless swords in the cave, but your sword has the spirit of the original person who drew it. That's wonderful." The scholar said, "I don't understand painting or swords, but I can understand the spirit of this sword. In my opinion, this sword can be ranked in the top 5 among the Academy's 1,000 years of collection. Continue writing, there will be more later. Thank you for your votes. Please continue to vote for it. It seems to be quite close to the first place in the weekly list. Let's go for it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 453. Inside the hut, the mountain breeze was gentle and pleasant, just like the headmaster's mood. Eldest brother and second brother sat quietly by the table, one grinding ink and the other making tea. The headmaster waved his hand and said with a smile, "I'm happy today, so I won't write any more." Second brother opened his mouth slightly and was about to say something. But he was the first gentleman in the world and could not do such a thing in front of his beloved teacher. Finally, he closed his mouth and continued grinding ink with a serious expression. Eldest brother looked at Junmo's expression and could not help shaking his head with a smile. Then he looked at the teacher behind the table and asked softly, "Teacher, why are you happy?" The headmaster laughed and said, "It's a good deal to exchange the Haoran sword without great spirit for Lu Bai's day sword." "Of course I'm happy." Eldest brother smiled and said, "I see." The headmaster stroked his beard and said, "That sword not only has the shape but also some of Lu Bai's charm. Your youngest brother is a superb calligrapher in the world and is best at copying. He also comprehended the art of separating words and memorizing them with the 8 strokes calligraphy of Yong. He is indeed the best person in the academy to do this." The headmaster and eldest brother were happy, but second brother was not. Lu Bai was recognized as the most powerful man in the world and was called the Sword Sage. But in his heart, the powerful man from the South Jin Kingdom was just an enemy that he would defeat in his cultivation and battle life. He was just a stone step that he would step on in the future. The day sword style contained in the paper sword was not qualified to be compared to the Haoran sword left behind by his youngest uncle, even if it was a Haoran sword without the great spirit. Second brother had always been a straightforward person who disdained to hide his emotions. Whatever he was thinking, he would show it on his face. However, as a person who respected his teacher, he could not refute the headmaster's words. Thus, he remained silent and continued to grind the ink, moving faster and faster. The ink in the square inkstone accumulated more and gradually formed a lake. The ink block rotated at a high speed and rolled up a black whirlpool. But strangely, no ink spilled out. The headmaster looked at the ink in the inkstone and sighed. It is said that dripping water can wear through a stone and grinding a pestle into a needle. But I have never heard of grinding ink through an inkstone. Second brother suddenly came to his senses and stopped what he was doing and sincerely apologized to the teacher. The headmaster looked at him and said, "Say what you want to say." Second senior brother frowned slightly and said, "Although Lu Bai's swordsmanship has some merits, it is not worthy of being on an equal footing with youngest uncle's Haoran sword." Moreover, youngest brother's methods are not very honorable. The headmaster said, "Since it is good, we should take it generously." The headmaster frowned even more. He thought the headmaster of second brother's words and thought. He thought the headmaster's words and thought. Suddenly, he realized that he had been so disrespectful to his teacher, and he couldn't help but feel regret. Suddenly, he realized that he had been so disrespectful to the headmaster and felt and said, he was master of the day sword. And said, Lu of the uncle. Academy, teacher of master, sword of the ocean of the Lu of teacher of sword. Teacher of brother of the sword of master, said. It is the same reason why the academy accepted the day sword. We are just preserving the wisdom of the previous generations and hope that it will sprout again. The headmaster and the eldest brother thought of the countless books in the cave at the back of the mountain. The second brother was shocked and hated himself for what he had done. He knelt on the futon and bowed to the headmaster. He said in a low voice, "I know I was wrong. I will go to all the cultivation sects in the world and ask them for their cultivation manuals." The expressions of the headmaster and eldest brother changed slightly, and they subconsciously wanted to find tea to drink. They thought that if they really asked those sects to hand over their cultivation manuals in the name of preserving human civilization, they would definitely think that they were crazy or robbers. Jun Mo, on the other hand, was a proud person who would do whatever he set his mind to, and would not give in even if he was in the right. If those sects refused to hand over their cultivation manuals, he would definitely not care about robbing them. Then, the so-called asking would naturally become robbing, and there would probably be a bloody battle in the cultivation world. The headmaster looked at him and reprimanded him in a low voice. If I could throw away my pride and not rob, I would have taken Lu Bai back to the academy and forced him to write it out when he comprehended the day sword. Why would I need your youngest brother to spend so much effort on this? I don't even know what you are thinking about. The eldest brother shook his head and said, "Of course it is voluntary." The second brother was confused by the headmaster's scolding. He said, but youngest brother's behavior is almost stealing. It is not much different from robbing. The headmaster of the academy was embarrassed. The eldest brother poured the tea at a speed that was rarely seen. He said respectfully, "Teacher, please have some tea." The headmaster of the academy took the tea and took a sip. He looked at his favorite eldest disciple and praised, "You are worth teaching." The second brother frowned and thought hard. What could he not be taught? The wild geese that spent the summer at Xuanyang Lake in the Gushan Commandery returned to Chang'an. They circled around the old Buddhist pagoda for a few days. Their shadows covered the sky and they chirped in the mountains and Yanming Lake. Then they flapped their wings and flew south to the warmer Great Swamp. They would not come back until next spring. The door of the old brush pen shop on Lin 47th Street had not been opened for a long time. The wild cat was lying on the wall and basking in the cooling sunshine. It looked at the dusty patio indifferently and wondered how many days had passed since the guy who had hit it with firewood died and whether his body had been exposed in the wilderness. At the entrance of the alley, there was a barbecue stand. Boss Wu kept an old dog. Every morning and dusk, he would walk the dog to relieve his loneliness and stress from his wife. As the weather got colder and colder, he would walk the dog once a day instead of twice a day, and the time was now noon. The gambling house in the West City was still thriving. Mr. Chi wore a long silk gown and played an iron ball in his hand. He accepted the compliments of his neighbors with a reserved manner like a rich man and wondered when second brother Chow would come back. The Taoist who performed talisman arts in the Taoist temple on Vermilion Bird Street was sick. But the Taoist temple was renovated, so more believers came to the temple to pray devoutly than before. Regardless of the passage of time or the change of seasons, the Tangs in Chang'an lived a peaceful and happy life as before. The hearty laughter in the streets never stopped. A paper sword was added to the collection at the back of the mountain of the academy. It was sent from the South Jin Kingdom to the West Hill and finally came to the Tang Empire. The smell of fresh paint in the house by the Yanming Lake gradually dissipated. The young people in the house went further and further on the road of cultivation. Under the sharpening of talisman intent and sword chi, Sang Sang understood how to use the divine skill to fight. Yi Hongyu learned the Haoran sword and understood the thin paper sword more and more deeply. With a powerful person like the Tao addict as his goal, Ning Kei's progress was even more amazing. He became stronger and stronger. His current cultivation level had already stabilized at the upper level of the see-through realm, and he was resolutely walking upwards, getting closer and closer to the ravine that seemed to be the gap between heaven and man. One day, amidst the mist and heavy willows, he actually faintly saw that threshold. However, what made him feel slightly perplexed was that the threshold was somewhat frighteningly high for the current him. Spring passed, summer returned, and autumn returned. When autumn returned to Chang'an, General Xia Ho, who had been stationed at the border of the Tang Empire for decades and made great achievements, was about to return to Chang'an. There are some more. I'm writing. I'm still asking for recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.